I became the god of light. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 128 The God of Shadows Strikes. The old priest couldn't help but recall the so-called divine magic techniques used by the Ice Tribe believers. Had the great god also bestowed upon him his own divine magic? He was both surprised and delighted. The other tribe's people around him watched the priest, noticing his constantly changing expression, and found it very strange. After a while, the old priest calmed down and, following the god's instructions, began to try using the healing magic. As soon as he connected with a transparent pattern, the pattern emitted a faint glow, and instantly the light power within his body rapidly depleted, almost completely disappearing in a short time. Just then, he had a sudden inspiration and pointed at Feng, who was lying on the ground. Healing spell, a pale green light emerged from his hand and quickly moved towards Feng, enveloping him in its green glow. The onlookers, including the leaders, were stunned, exclaiming in astonishment, "Isn't this a divine miracle, God?" The priest actually performed it. They watched in shock as the green light enveloped Feng Hao, and the wounds that had been bleeding suddenly began to twitch, with tendrils of flesh emerging from them. The wounds were healing. Feng groaned softly in his unconscious state. Truly a divine miracle, the crowd murmured to themselves, their eyes filled with envy as they gazed at the priest, wishing they could possess this ability as well. However, among the astonished crowd, a few were puzzled, such as a woman named Shui. She remembered that the priest had performed a similar miracle before, but this time it seemed different. She noticed that the green light wasn't as beautiful as it used to be. It should have been as dazzling as a divine miracle, but now it looked like ordinary green light. This scene deeply puzzled her. Moreover, Feng's wounds hadn't fully healed before the green light dissipated. The old priest's face was pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead. All the light power within him had been exhausted. Looking up at Feng's wounds, he saw that the bleeding had stopped and the wounds had healed somewhat, but to fully heal, he would probably need to cast one or two more healing spells. However, that would have to wait, as he had no more power left. Priest, the leader walked to his side, looking at him with burning eyes. Your ability, he hesitated, then stopped. That's right, it's a divine spell bestowed upon me by the great god. The old priest grinned, beaming with pride. Indeed, the crowd's faces were filled with envy, wishing they could take his place. This was the power of the gods, wouldn't it be an honor to possess it? Envy and jealousy. My abilities are insufficient, I cannot unleash the power of the gods, Alice, the old priest sighed, looking at Feng. I'll continue to heal him after I recover. In the shadows, Su Yun observed the old priest's divine spell effects and discovered that the appearance of his healing spells was indeed emasculated. The overall healing ability, it couldn't even be cured in one session. Not only the appearance, but even the effect was much weaker. Suddenly, something occurred to him. Could it be that another effect has also been nerfed? Thinking this, he felt his suspicions might be correct. To confirm, after the old priest fell asleep, the god descended upon him and captured a small animal to experiment on. The result was as he expected. The healing spell was reduced to a weakened healing ability. It seems that if the other characters are bestowed, their effects will likely be nerfed as well, Su Yun muttered to himself, speculating. He estimated that if the fire character were bestowed, it would be pure fire, at most possessing divine attributes, but the decomposition ability would definitely be gone. Forget it, I'll continue researching the newly appeared characters. Su Yun shook his head. Before that clansman's accident, the divine space had indeed given birth to a new character, just as he had envisioned. Since my guess was correct, I can now use the clansman to plan the other characters, he smiled. After attempting to activate the character but failing immediately, he sighed inwardly. Unfortunately, I'm still lacking some faith threads. Su Yun stared at the more than 9,000 faith threads, feeling a sense of urgency. Soon. I'll advance in a little while. Then I'll not only become a level 3 god, greatly increasing my strength, but I'll also have more character slots. I just wonder what the effect of this blessing character will be. Thinking of this, he was filled with anticipation. The next day, the tribe continued its daily life as usual, but with some differences. For example, the tribe's people's worries lessened considerably when they went out. Knowing that the priest could help them heal, they no longer feared serious injury and death, and were much more courageous in their prey. Besides this, some tribes' people took fishing nets to the river, catching plenty of fish each time, bringing a large amount of food to the tribe. They even learned, under Su Yun's guidance, how to use salt to preserve food, allowing meat to be stored for a long time, starting to stockpile food for winter. In the center of the tribe, the old priest and 6 newly promoted divine warriors stood beside the field of divinely bestowed plants, looking at the somewhat wilted plants with worry in their eyes. The emerald green seedlings looked as if they had lost moisture, their leaves drooping. "Priest, let me try," Kwang said first. He walked to the wilted seedlings and, with a thought, activated the power of light within him. The light enveloped a portion of the divinely bestowed plants. Then, a scene that astonished everyone appeared. The wilted plants glowed faintly in the light seeping into them as if absorbed. After nearly a minute, Kwang's face paled, and the light dissipated. His power was exhausted. As the light faded, everyone looked at the divinely bestowed plants and found that their wilting had greatly improved. The leaves were beginning to lift again. "It works," the crowd rejoiced and quickly began watering the plants with the power of light. While the Yanhuang people were busy, far away, a group of several dozen people were packing their belongings, seemingly preparing for a long journey. "How interesting, such a small tribe possesses so many treasures," a divine figure, seemingly shrouded in shadow, gazed into the distance with cold, dark eyes. "But soon, all those treasures will belong to me." He, the god of shadows, let out a chilling laugh. For the sake of those benefits, just to be on the safe side, he decided to personally take action this time. And as he said, there was no reason for him to fail. He was a third-level god, far superior to the first or second-level gods of those small tribes. In his mind, once he arrived at that place, a single blow would be enough to annihilate that weak god. Without wasting much of his time. Thanks to for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Chapter 129 The Overbearing Shadow Tribe. The entire group of several dozen people, all of whom were divine warriors, moved at an astonishing speed. At their pace, they would reach the small tribe in less than half a day. At the head of the group, a middle-aged, ugly, level 3 divine warrior named Hazy grinned and said, "I heard that the small tribe we're going to this time has a lot of good stuff." His voice was full of greed as he finished speaking. "That's right, according to Leopard, even that damned fire god tribe has their eyes on the things in that small tribe. We're really lucky this time, we've hit the jackpot." Another middle-aged man named Fei Ying, with a rough appearance and a full beard, also a level 3 divine warrior, said with a smile. "I wonder what the women in that small tribe are like." Hazy chuckled lewdly. "Once we capture them, they'll all be slaves, and you can do whatever you want with them." The other middle-aged man revealed a knowing smile. Ho ha! Everyone who heard this couldn't help but laugh. After the laughter subsided, someone couldn't help but ask doubtfully, "I don't understand why the god has to intervene personally. With us level 3 god warriors, surely we can defeat the god of that small tribe?" According to the information Leopard sent, the opponent is at most a small tribe of 1,000 people, and their god certainly isn't that powerful. As a level 3 god warrior, he was well aware that the more believers a god has, the stronger he becomes, so he was filled with doubt as to why the esteemed god was making such a fuss. "Yes," Hazy agreed wholeheartedly, saying arrogantly, "with nearly 10 level 3 god warriors like us, even if that small tribe's god is powerful, as long as it's not the god of a large tribe of 10,000 people, he definitely can't defeat us." All the level 3 god warriors present thought the same way. They all felt that the esteemed and great god was condescending to intervene, which was giving that god too much credit. "Let's take action beforehand and eliminate that god, so as not to trouble the esteemed god of shadows to intervene personally," Fei Ying said with a sinister smile. "That's right," agreed. The others' eyes lit up. They all thought the suggestion was good. As long as they dealt with the opponent before the god intervened, they wouldn't need to trouble the god. Everyone was eager to try, hoping time would pass quickly. The god of shadows, hiding in the shadows of the believers, glanced at them approvingly. "As expected of my believers, ha! A chilling laugh echoed from the hidden places. The group moved forward at an extremely fast pace, and several hours passed quickly. Blackie, walking ahead, suddenly opened his eyes and shouted angrily. Hearing this, the others immediately became alert. "Wait, Don't attack, it's me. Leopard quickly stepped out of the shadows, his expression showing some respect. Leopard, it's you? Blackie breathed a sigh of relief. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Come with me, that small tribe isn't far ahead. Leopard smiled. Blackie and the others' eyes lit up with excitement, urging, hurry up, we can't wait any longer. Leopard nodded and hurriedly turned and ran off in one direction. Behind them, Hazy and dozens of others quickly followed. After walking for about 10 minutes, the group's eyes lit up as they looked at the wooden houses in the distance. It really is a good place. Even the houses are so novel, Hazy exclaimed, then sneered, but soon they'll be our tribes, let's go. With that command, the group gradually approached the small tribe. Inside the divine stone space, Suyun, who was practicing his divine power, suddenly frowned. He sensed a large group of extraordinary auras approaching from outside the tribe. The auras were quite strong, with nearly 10 similar to that of the Orm. So many level 3 divine warriors, what's going on? Suyun's expression turned cold. After a moment's thought, he muttered to himself, it seems they're up to no good. Judging from the level 3 divine warriors, these people must belong to a large tribe of 10,000, and the fact that so many had been mobilized at once was clearly not normal. Without thinking too much, he quickly relayed the message to the old priest, instructing him to gather the tribesmen for refuge. Then, he moved and directly left the divine stone space. The divine stone shone brightly. Suyun appeared above, ignoring the panicked tribesmen, and quickly flew towards the outskirts of the tribe. Just as they approached the small village, Hazy and the others were astonished to see a holy light hurtling towards them. Are you the god of this tribe? Hazy and the others looked at this extraordinary god, their faces showing surprise. In all these years, this was the first time they had seen a god with such a unique appearance. A hazy figure radiating white light, with delicate white clothing fluttering in the wind, the entire figure exuded a sacred and ethereal aura. After a moment of surprise, Hazy and the others came to their senses. No matter how unique their appearance, nothing could stop them with such an absolute difference in strength, including the god before them. Hazy sneered, it's good you've come, it saves us the trouble of searching for you. To tell you the truth, our shadow tribe has our eyes on the things of your little tribe, he said arrogantly. I advise you, God, to behave yourself and offer up all the good things from your tribe. Then we might spare your life. If our great shadow god is merciful, he might even accept you as a subordinate god. Be grateful, little god. Suyun, enveloped in white light, was slightly taken aback upon hearing this. It was the first time he had heard someone make invasion sound so grand. Look, not only do they have to surrender, but even if they surrender, their survival depends on the mercy of that so-called shadow god. Does that mean if he's not merciful, they'll die? Suyun remained expressionless, completely ignoring this arrogant fellow. Looking down at the nearly 10 level 3 divine warriors and the 20-odd level 2 divine warriors, Suyun felt a sense of unease. I have no choice but to use that move. Coldly observing them, Suyun wasn't going to waste time and immediately began to subtly suppress the hidden light emanating from his body. However, he hadn't suppressed it for long when his brow furrowed slightly. He sensed something was wrong. Suyun discovered that the light emanating from these divine warriors was much harder to extinguish than that from ordinary objects, requiring significantly more time to complete the polar day technique. Wait, what's this? Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. Within the shadow of one of the level 3 divine warriors, he discovered a peculiar luminous figure. Moreover, the subtle light emanating from that figure was far stronger than that of the other divine warriors, and extinguishing it was far more difficult. At least with his current strength, it would take him a considerable amount of time to extinguish the light from this figure. After a brief moment of thought and speculation, Suyun guessed a figure's identity. The god of shadows? A level 3 deity. They really think highly of me. Feeling a strong sense of crisis, the coldness in his eyes intensified. How dare you ignore me? Hazy glanced at his companions, who were barely suppressing their laughter, and was almost unable to hold back his anger, nearly striking. To buy some time, Suyun spoke as he wished, coldly saying, Shadow tribe? How do you know my tribe has so-called good things? As he spoke, he tried his best to suppress the light emanating from the god of shadows, his divine power rapidly consuming. At the same time, he immediately activated the small black sphere within his body. Boom! An exceptionally surging divine power poured in from the real world, almost instantly replenishing his divine power, while newly added threads of faith quickly connected. In the blink of an eye, the number of these threads of faith, combined with the original number, directly reached a bottleneck. The divine spark, originally dominated by two colors, saw its yellow light surge, instantly reaching 99%, with only a last bit of orange stubbornly struggling. What is this? Su-Yun looked at the number of newly added threads of faith in surprise. How could so many threads of faith have increased so suddenly? A rough count revealed that the number had already reached over 13,000, and was still rapidly increasing. Unbeknownst to him, the Vatican had recently widely publicized a video of him in the real world, causing Catholic believers to pray fervently with great joy. This was just a small number, given the size of the Catholic faith. Even if he wasn't playing God, his mere presence as a suspected six-winged archangel would be enough to gather a large following. After his initial shock, Su-Yun forcibly suppressed the feeling of advancing. Advancing required time and involved periods of weakness. Now was clearly not a good time. After a moment of regret, Su-Yun shifted his attention back. With a surge of divine power, his confidence increased dramatically. Not much time had passed in reality. Hazy, hearing his words, assumed the small tribe's god was afraid, completely unaware that the shadow of death was gradually looming over them as time passed. He said smugly, "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to the fire god tribe. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have discovered your tribe." He sneered, not forgetting to sow discord with ambiguous words. The people around him laughed along. Leopard said coldly, "It's all thanks to your people, otherwise I wouldn't have known your little tribe had so many good things: porcelain, snowflake salt, several high-yield divinely bestowed plants." With each item Leopard mentioned, the eyes of the dozens of people from the Shadow tribe changed, revealing naked greed and possessiveness. "Your tribe has too many things that are not yours to possess. I think Lord Blackie's suggestion is good. I advise you to be sensible, otherwise." Leopard's expression turned cold, not finishing his sentence, but the meaning was self-evident. The atmosphere suddenly became tense, as if a fight could break out at any moment. Su-Yun frowned slightly as he looked at the ugly expressions of these people. The polar day spell is now mostly complete. With the inexplicably surging power of faith in the real world replenishing it, even third-level divine warriors have had their hidden light forcibly extinguished, and they could be reduced to ashes at any moment. However, the light on the Shadow God has only been extinguished by 1/10. It will take at least 5 or 6 minutes to completely extinguish it. There's no other way. I can only try to buy as much time as possible to extinguish as much light as possible, so I can cause more damage." With a sigh, Su-Yun looked at the dozens of people below whose deaths were imminent, without a trace of anger. Regardless of the situation between him and the Shadow God, these people below were doomed. At this moment, a large group of people emerged from the tribe, about 100 adult men wielding stone spears. "God," the old priest and others cried out urgently. "Didn't I tell you to hide?" Su-Yun sighed slightly. "Fight for the god, even if it means death," the chief and others shouted, raising their stone spears. They didn't want to be protected by the gods without doing anything. They knew this enemy was formidable, but even at the cost of their lives, they wanted to do something for their gods. Hearing their words, Fei Ying mocked, "You people have no self-awareness. Are you here to die? To be buried with your gods?" "Lord Fei Ying, don't say that. These people are valuable slave resources. They might have come out willingly to acknowledge us as their masters," Leopard said with a laugh. Fei Ying and the others were stunned, then bursts of rough laughter rang out, deafeningly loud. 1/5, Su-Yun's eyes turned cold as he looked at these clowns. After laughing, Hazy and the others, seeing that neither the people of this tribe nor the gods showed any intention of surrendering, gave a cold smile. Without saying anything more, Hazy strode forward, black mist emanating from his body. The others watched with smiles, their faces showing no worry, clearly having complete confidence in Hazy. Just as he made his move, Su-Yun was slightly surprised to find that under the midday sun, the shadows of the trees seemed to distort slightly. Then, dozens of distorted tree shadows, like sharp swords, simultaneously stabbed towards Su-Yun. Divine art, shadow control. Hazy grinned ferociously, commanding the shadows to attack at an extremely fast speed. "It's here, it's shadow control." The other Shadow Clan members' eyes lit up. They knew the power of this divine art. Those shadows were not as simple as they appeared, they were truly difficult to deal with and sharp. If they were pierced, this small tribe's god would be doomed. Just as they were filled with anticipation, Su-Yun looked at these shadows and, without thinking, subconsciously unleashed a condensed white light to collide with him. The white light, like a circular shield, instantly collided with the shadow swords. As a result, an unexpected scene appeared. As soon as the shadows entered the white light, they were like fire extinguished by water, only struggling and twisting slightly before quickly dissipating completely. What? Impossible! Kurako and the others stared wide-eyed, as if they had seen something unbelievable, looking at the scene in utter disbelief. Chapter 130 Cleric Restrained. Even Suyun, witnessing the scene, raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise on his face. Logically, as a level 3 divine warrior, even if there was a difference in strength, shouldn't the divine magic be more than one-sided, at least reaching a stalemate? However, while he was surprised, the god of shadows, who was hiding on the believer and watching with a smile, also widened his eyes, his face filled with disbelief. He had initially intended to watch the show, but now his expression turned serious. He guessed a reason, and this guess caused his killing intent to surge. Divine power counteraction, Suyun murmured to himself. In his eyes, this was the only possibility. Gods are different. Compared to light, shadow is clearly countered by light. Darkness is the counterpart to light, and shadow is clearly a branch of the divine power of darkness, not to mention that it was the shadow power used by a believer. It was perfectly normal for it to be utterly defeated by the divine power of light. If it truly is a divine advantage, then by the same logic, the god of shadows should also be able to be countered by me. Thinking of this good news, his sense of crisis eased slightly. The pressure from the third-level god was immense. Based on past advancements, each advancement brought a tenfold increase in power. In direct combat, he could only rely on various symbols to prolong the fight. But the divine advantage gave him more confidence. I don't believe it, Hazy roared, waving his hand again. Shadow ball technique. A huge sphere of black mist appeared before him, then flew towards Suyun at incredible speed. It's shadow ball technique. This time it must be. The other Shadow Clan members regained their senses and their confidence returned. Last time was just an accident, they believed this divine technique. Suyun narrowed his eyes. To test his suspicions, he didn't choose to dodge, but instead waved out a circular white protective shield once more. The two collided rapidly, and the bizarre scene unfolded once again. The massive shadow sphere struck the white light shield, but like ice-hitting lava, it rapidly melted and dissipated. During this process, although some of the white light was also neutralized, the difference in power and the restraint between the two was obvious to anyone with discerning eyes. Just as I expected, Suyun muttered to himself. The dozens of Shadow Clan members who had been trying to escape fell silent, their faces turning grim. The great power of the shadows, it actually, Fei Ying and the others murmured in disbelief. The old priest and the others, however, were invigorated, gazing at Suyun in the air with worshipful eyes. God is as powerful as ever, these outsiders dare to offend God, they will surely be punished, they declared with fervor and anger. Attack together, Hazy, disregarding everything else, was filled with rage. The leopard sneered, let's all work together. I refuse to believe that with so many of us, we can't defeat the god of a small tribe. With that, a group of level 3 and 2 divine warriors unleashed their divine magic, sending various shadow spheres and object shadows hurtling towards the radiant god in the sky. He's doomed. At that moment, both the Shadow Clan members and the Shadow God had this thought. Logically, this attack was something a small tribe's god couldn't withstand. These were nearly 10 level 3 divine warriors and over 20 level 2 divine warriors. Aside from the gods of large tribes, they didn't believe anyone could withstand it. A quarter, Suyun muttered to himself, watching dozens of attacks sweep towards him. Even with his divine power, which countered them, he would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. However, he didn't choose to retreat. He had no choice but to use divine magic. Golden Wheel, Suyun shouted coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, his divine power plummeted, but it was quickly replenished by the exceptionally surging faith power of the real world. A golden, fist-sized sphere suddenly appeared beside him, and in the blink of an eye, it solidified into a spherical object, completely enveloping him. What is this? The Shadow Clan members below were slightly taken aback. Divine magic? HMPH, the Shadow God sneered, confidently stating, even a second-level god can't. In the sunlight, the golden sphere shimmered with dazzling light, and then, a tidal wave of shadow attacks crashed into it with a deafening roar. The dozens of Shadow Clan members below, who had just subconsciously smiled, froze the next second. How is this possible? They saw that the dozens of shadow attacks were like hitting a rock. No, even a rock should have been pulverized by now, yet the surface of the large golden sphere only had some dents, remaining firmly in place. This scene deeply shocked them. Is this really the god of a small tribe? The shadow god's face darkened. 1/3, Suyun, hiding inside the golden wheel, secretly estimated the progress. However, at this moment, something happened that made him frown. The god of shadows, whom he had been constantly aware of, actually stepped out from among the shadows of his followers. Finally out, Suyun sighed inwardly. He had thought that this damned god of shadows would wait until he completed the polar day technique before coming out, but he hadn't expected it to be so short-lived. Emerging from the golden wheel, Suyun looked at the figure that had suddenly appeared in the crowd, a figure shrouded in black with a cold and handsome appearance. The Shadow Clan members all looked at the god with awe. Hazy and the others felt a little regretful. They hadn't expected that in the end, the god would have to take action. But this time, that damned guy was really doomed. They thought with certainty. Clap clap clap, the sound of applause suddenly rang out. The god of shadows looked at the luminous figure in the air and praised softly, "Truly astonishing, you are even more powerful than I thought. Who would have thought that the god of a small tribe could resist so many of my followers? Any other god would probably be dead by now, wouldn't they?" His words were full of praise and admiration, as if he were very friendly. However, in reality, the killing intent within him was almost unbearable. The fact that a mere second-level deity's power was beyond his expectations was one thing. He might be somewhat wary. After all, the strength of deities at each stage vary drastically. Even if this second-level deity was strong, could it possibly overcome the vast difference in level and allow him to fight beyond his level? The thought was simply impossible. If anyone actually told him it was possible, he would scoff and spit in their face. The only thing that truly made him want to kill this deity was his divine office. This damned fellow possessed the very divine office of light that he loathed and feared most. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 131. I said, "Let there be light in the world." If you waited until the other became a third-level god, wouldn't he be completely suppressed and manipulated at will? He absolutely wouldn't allow it. Blame it on you having what I need and holding an annoying divine position, so you must die? Thinking this, he prepared to attack. Actually, if it weren't for the many believers present, given his cold and sinister nature, he would have launched a sneak attack just now, eliminating the future threat directly. This guy was lucky, really. Just as he was about to attack, he noticed the sky seemed to darken. What's going on? He was slightly puzzled for a moment, then instantly focused his attention on that damned god of light. He saw that the light was converging towards him. Something was definitely wrong. Instinctively, he sensed something was amiss, and a strong sense of crisis suddenly arose within him. What? The god of shadows froze, seemingly unable to believe it, but this intuition prevented him from taking the risk. Better safe than sorry. He really made his move. In an instant, a shadow rapidly expanded from him, covering an area of several hundred meters in the sky in the blink of an eye, sending chills down everyone's spine. Is this a third-level god? A casual strike can cover hundreds of meters, Suyun muttered to himself, while looking at the sky, which had almost completely darkened. What a pity, it only reached halfway. If only I had a little more time, God. The old priest and the others were filled with worry. This terrifying scene terrified them. They had never seen such power before. This is our god, ha ha ha. Hazy and the others laughed proudly, saying with contempt and regret, "You're going to die. What a pity, we haven't defeated you with our own hands yet, what a pity." They shook their heads. Die? The god of shadows coldly stared at him and waved his hand. A colossal black shadow, hundreds of meters long, like a terrifying beast, lunged fiercely at Suyun, about to devour him. At that moment, the sky rapidly darkened, a darkness far deeper than the attack of the god of shadows about to engulf the world. I say, light and darkness shall be separated. A cold, holy voice, like the ultimate truth of heaven and earth, rang out. Immediately, everyone's vision was filled with nothing but darkness. Not a single ray of light could be seen. Even the attack of the god of shadows was swallowed up. Just as their faces showed shock, the cold, holy voice continued. and accompanying the voice was an incomparably dazzling radiance. I say, let there be light, light. Dazzling light. Seemingly boundless light emanated from Su-Yun, then rapidly illuminated the world. No one had ever felt light so dazzling before. The God of Shadows' hundreds of meters long attack, barely reaching Su-Yun, was instantly frozen in place by the light. In an instant, the once complete black shadow attack was riddled with holes, like snow swallowed by lava. Wisps of ash appeared on the behemoth, and after losing almost half its size, it vanished with a deafening roar. Dozens of Shadow Tribe members stared blankly at this incomprehensible scene. The power of a god had actually been impossible. The God of Shadows paled. This scene was beyond his comprehension, and he initially thought it was an illusion. However, before he could say anything more, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of crisis. A warm glow shone upon the God of Shadows and dozens of divine warriors. Just as everyone was still reeling from the shock, their expressions changed drastically in the next second. My hand, panic shouts erupted from the crowd, screams escalating intermittently. Ah! My leg. No, whether they were level 3 or level 2 divine warriors, the moment the light shone upon them, their bodies underwent a strange transformation. Wisps of dust-like matter began to appear on their bodies. And that dust was actually their own flesh and blood. Screams and panic erupted from the crowd as they tried to stop the dust from spreading, but all their efforts were in vain. God! Save us! Kurako and Hii desperately pleaded with the God of Shadows. The God of Shadows reacted quickly, roaring, "It was you! What have you done?" With his words, Kurako, Hii, and the others also realized what had happened. Looking at their half-disappeared bodies, they instinctively begged for mercy. Stop! You can't kill us! God won't let you get away with this. However, before they could finish speaking, they were horrified to see the dust rapidly spreading, immediately reaching their heads. And to their utter disbelief, they saw that the great God of Shadows also seemed to possess. No, this is impossible. At this moment, their minds collapsed, and they nearly went mad. The great God of Shadows of the Great Tribe had actually been defeated by a mere minor deity. Desperate cries rose and fell. God, the God of Shadows' eyes were bloodshot as he looked at AZ and the others, who were reaching out their remaining hand, seemingly seeking his help. That outstretched hand, and those desperate, unspoken eyes, caused a pang of pain in his heart. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. A gentle breeze blew by, wisps of dust filled the air, and the scene became a vast emptiness and silence. Success, Su-Yun murmured to himself. The God of Shadows turned his head, glaring furiously at the God of Light above him. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed drastically. He looked down sharply and saw that dust had appeared on his own body. The sight of this thing immediately filled him with dread. He had witnessed the fate of his people. Could he too? No. I am a third-level god. How could a second-level god do such an impossible thing? The God of Shadows tried desperately to deny it, but the ever-increasing dust on his divine body made it impossible for him to ignore. Only a few seconds later, his body was riddled with holes, and dark gray divine blood seeped out. His heart pounded like a drum as he stared at Su-Yun above him, his face filled with astonishment and uncertainty. Was this guy a third-level god in disguise? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Su-Yun remained calm. In truth, after using that move, he had no strength left to use it again. If this God of Shadows continued to attack him now, his mind raced, his thoughts working at an incredibly fast pace. The next moment, Su-Yun waved his hand, and light began to gather in his palm. The sky darkened rapidly, and at the same time, a detached voice resounded throughout the heavens and earth. I say, light and darkness will separate. The God of Shadows' eyes flickered. He suddenly took flight, roaring, "Die!" As soon as he finished speaking, a massive black curtain swiftly descended upon him. Su-Yun's expression darkened slightly. He sensed a profound sense of danger. Could it be that I failed? Thanks to Fierce Life for the 588 book coins reward. Chapter 132 Advancement to Third Level Godhood. He hadn't expected that this God of Shadows, having suffered half the damage from the Polar Day technique, could still attack despite his body still turning to ash. Sensing something was wrong, he prepared to withstand the attack. He barely managed to withstand it by summoning 2 golden wheels to form a protective shield. Then, Su-Yun's wary expression suddenly froze, as if he had discovered something astonishing. Removing the golden wheels, he discovered that the God of Shadows, who should have continued attacking, had vanished from his senses. Escaped. Su-Yun was somewhat incredulous. He had pretended to continue using the polar day technique just now, intending to bluff his opponent, but this god of shadows, to be honest, for a moment, he thought the god of shadows had seen through his disguise, or decided to avenge his followers. He hadn't expected it to be just a feint, a one-hit wonder. If he had continued attacking, he would have been in a difficult position. Fortunately, he wasn't a reckless god. It suited his cold and sinister appearance perfectly. Su-Yun carefully searched the area, confirming that the god of shadows had truly disappeared. Just to be safe, I need to advance quickly. If that guy realizes something's wrong and comes back to attack, things will be bad. I need to advance quickly during this time so that even if the opponent attacks, they can't do anything to me, and if they really attack, I might even lose my life. Looking at the tribespeople kneeling on the ground, cheering and jumping for joy. God is invincible, great, the god drove away the invaders. From their words, it was clear they were the gods of a large tribe of 10,000, and even that god had been driven away by the great god of light. For a moment, everyone looked devoutly at the glowing divine figure in the sky, their hearts filled with pride and worship. Su-Yun was somewhat amused and exasperated. After mentally instructing the priest to begin the ritual, he flashed and quickly flew towards the divine stone. Damn it, the god of shadows cursed incessantly, quickly fleeing back to his tribe. His condition was terrible, his body was riddled with holes, almost half of his divine form gone. Divine blood was constantly flowing, and his muscles were missing pieces here and there, making him look like a ghost, fit for a ghost movie boss. Su-Yun had completed half of the polar day technique, severely injuring him. It was precisely because of that terrifying move that the god of shadows couldn't gauge Su-Yun's strength. He was so terrified he almost lost his soul. He wouldn't dare go back to test him, another attempt might have killed him. The god of shadows endured the excruciating pain. His powerful divine strength caused granulation tissue to sprout from his flesh, and he was healing, though it would take about a day to fully recover. This was the terror of a god, a creature missing half its body, even if its vital organs weren't damaged, would be dead by now, let alone able to slowly recover. Just wait. You've killed so many of my followers, you'll pay the price. A look of resentment flashed in the god of shadows' eyes, completely forgetting who had invaded first. I'll get back and call the others. We'll see if you're still alive next time. He decided that once he got back, he would immediately contact those other tribal gods who, like him, were inclined towards aggression. With some sacrifices and some exaggeration of the small tribe's treasures, they'd be hard-pressed not to be tempted. He figured that if the major tribal gods joined forces, no matter how powerful that damn guy was, he'd only end up perishing. You're dead. He, the god of shadows, revealed a cold, twisted smile, which, combined with his current appearance, was truly terrifying. Back in the pristine white divine stone space, Su-Yun waited for his faith power to recover and for the ritual to begin. At this moment, he subconsciously checked the threads of faith and found that they had reached nearly 16,000, and were still increasing. So many, Su-Yun murmured in surprise. It seems the video from the real world was transmitted overseas. This was the only way to cause such a large increase, so he easily guessed it. Never mind, let's advance first. Outside, the old priest was leading his people in a ritual, waves of faith flowing from the modern world and here towards Su-Yun, rapidly replenishing his divine power. Seeing this, Su-Yun's heart stirred, and he immediately released his suppression. Advancement begins. Instantly. The divine spark in characters, which had only a trace of orange left, were immediately and eagerly stained yellow. Whoosh! The divine spark trembled slightly, emitting a series of clear sounds. A yellow flame spontaneously ignited around the divine spark. The divine spark quickly turned into a pool of yellow liquid, then rapidly condensed and shaped. Before long, a brilliant yellow divine spark with 36 facets floated quietly in the divine spark space. An even more powerful divine power flowed into his divine body at this moment, rapidly transforming and strengthening it. Finally, I've advanced. Su-Yun breathed a sigh of relief. The sense of crisis that had been lingering in his heart had finally subsided. If that shadow god were to return, he would definitely be in deep trouble. Having thought this through, he began to sense the changes from his advancement. His first impression, power. Incredible power. Compared to before, he vaguely felt he had become at least 10 times stronger. He could easily unleash attacks from the shadow god that stretched hundreds of meters. Raising his palm, a condensed white light emerged. Sensing the intensity, He knew his guess was correct. This is only level 3. If I continue to advance, Su Yun gasped. The difference between a weak god and a powerful god was truly like heaven and earth. No wonder that Shadow God was so arrogant. Su Yun stared at his divine spark, checking the number of people needed for the next advancement. A tiny emerald green light appeared at the bottom of the yellow divine spark. After silently estimating in his mind, he arrived at a rough estimate. 100,000. Upon first calculating, Su Yun instinctively thought he had miscalculated. After confirming several times, he gasped. 100,000? 100,000. This number skyrocketed tenfold. To be honest, even he felt a suffocating pressure. Good heavens, Su Yun only managed to get a little over 10,000 after playing the role twice in the modern world. Getting 100,000 would be a nightmare. And this was just him, he could only complain at most. Gaining followers was incredibly easy for him in the modern world. If it were those native gods, they'd be dumbfounded by now. Luckily, the real world is working well. The threads of faith are increasing rapidly, gaining followers while lying down. Su Yun smiled. After thinking about all this, he turned his attention to the characters. Looking at the unactivated blessing characters, he activated them on a whim. In the blink of an eye, a transparent thread shot out from his divine essence, connecting with the characters. The characters began to change, quickly turning yellow overall, with a small section of emerald green at the bottom. Chapter 133 Blessing Characters. Blessing. The character was indeed a blessing spell, just as he expected. Let's test its effect, Su Yun thought to himself and activated the character. A brilliant yet gentle white light emanated from his hand and was then swung onto his body. The moment he touched the white light, Su Yun felt a change in his divine body. He subconsciously clenched his fist and keenly sensed that his physique and strength had increased significantly. When he unleashed another beam of divine power, he found that its intensity had increased by at least 20%. Amazing, Su Yun exclaimed unconsciously. Don't underestimate this 20% increase. From another perspective, it's a different story. This boost is at least more than his full strength at level 2, which shows how terrifying it is. I wonder if it's a fixed 20% boost? If so, this character is incredibly powerful. Su Yun's eyes shone as he muttered to himself. It's nothing now, but what about later? A 20% boost, how terrifying would that be? Let's see if it can be stacked. A sudden inspiration struck him, and he suppressed his excitement and began experimenting. Unfortunately, after a while, he sighed, having failed. As expected, things don't always go that smoothly. Disappointed, he carefully sensed the character again. As he sensed it, Su Yun suddenly vaguely perceived a faint, ethereal power within him. This power was inexplicable, leaving him bewildered, and he couldn't figure it out after sensing it for a long time. If this character hadn't been his own ability, and hadn't been used on himself, he might not have even noticed this hidden power. What is this? Su Yun frowned. This power is too obscure. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't understand what the hidden power of this character represented. Fine, I'll experiment on my tribesmen. Turning his gaze to the outside, the ritual was almost over, but the tribesmen hadn't left yet. Instead, they were all gathered together, discussing excitedly. They were very excited. Today, the great god had once again defeated a powerful enemy, and everyone's heart was filled with worship. The impression of the god's invincibility was incredibly deep in their minds. With a quick glance, Su Yun set his sights on the chieftain. It's you I've chosen. Blessing. With a wave of his hand, a dazzling white light shot outwards, striking the chieftain who was smiling and talking to his people at incredible speed. Simultaneously, he split off a portion of his consciousness, directly descending upon the chieftain to experience the effect firsthand. Enveloped in the dazzling white light, the chieftain looked around in astonishment, a hint of fear creeping into his expression. What's going on? The other tribesmen, noticing the chieftain's unusual behavior, became tense and flustered. Su Yun noticed their reactions and, with a thought, relayed his words to the priest. He told them it was just a blessing and not to panic. The old priest was surprised, turning to look at the somewhat flustered chieftain, a sense of envy rising within him. Chieftain, don't be nervous, the old priest said. This is a blessing bestowed upon you by the great god. Upon hearing this, the chieftain and the others paused slightly, then all breathed a sigh of relief. During this time, they often said may God bless you, naturally knowing what it meant. Chief, You're so lucky. I want God's blessing too. The tribespeople looked at their leader with envy, their eyes reddening. To be blessed by the great God was an honor. Looking at the expressions of the others, the chief unconsciously revealed a smug smile, and couldn't help but laugh heartily. Ha ha ha! For the chief, this was something to be proud of. Seeing the envious expressions of the others, he couldn't help but feel proud. Ahem, the old priest coughed a few times, unable to resist interrupting. Chief, how are you feeling? The chief stopped laughing and checked his body. Clenching his fist, he felt his tired body and spirit suddenly reach the peak, his body seemingly filled with inexhaustible strength. With a stomp of his foot, he leaped. To everyone's astonishment, he jumped more than 2 meters high. Don't underestimate this. Just imagine someone jumping to height equal to a person's height. It's unbelievable. The old priest and the others stared in astonishment, their mouths agape. Falling to the ground, the chieftain, suppressing his excitement, started running again. A gust of wind swept by, and he ran around the crowd at 2 or 3 times his usual speed. In the primitive society, the chieftain was already physically strong and fast, but now, with a blessing, his speed was so great that even Olympic champions would be completely outmatched. The chieftain himself felt it even more deeply. He felt that in his current state, he could defeat the beast that had previously tormented him, without even needing the power of light, simply by virtue of his physical abilities. The old priest and the others were dumbfounded, filled with envy. Truly a blessing from the gods, the effect was incredible. The chieftain then stopped and shouted, "People of the tribe, after being blessed by the gods, I feel full of power. Now is the perfect time to go hunting. Is anyone willing to come with me? I'll go." The atmosphere was perfect, and many tribesmen volunteered. Soon, the chieftain selected 5 people and strode out of the tribe. Inside the chieftain's body, Su-Yun seemed to be deep in thought. Compared to blessing himself, blessing the chieftain's enhanced body and power of light should be 2 or 3 times greater. He wondered if this was because of his divine status, resulting in less effect than ordinary people. The chieftain and his men had only been away from the tribe for a short while when a sudden commotion arose. "Be careful," the chieftain whispered a warning. The 6 men stared intently at the bushes from which the sound had come, fearing a ferocious beast might emerge. Each gripped their stone spears tightly, their palms slightly sweaty. The chieftain made a gesture, then quietly approached the bushes. Gripping the end of his spear, he slowly parted the bushes, using its length. Upon seeing what was hidden inside, he immediately became alert. It was a carnivorous animal, resembling a leopard, clearly a predator. However, the chieftain's alertness lasted only a second before he relaxed slightly. He discovered that the beast was severely injured and was barely breathing. Clearly, it had been attacked by another animal and was now very weak. Taking advantage of its weakness, the chief and his men showed no mercy. In primitive society, it was either humans eating animals or animals eating humans. It didn't take much effort for him to easily kill the wounded animal, and the prey was carried away by the tribesmen. Chapter 134 Luck Effects and Polar Day Spell Characters. Haha, what great luck today, the leader couldn't help but grin, and the others were also beaming with joy. Encountering an animal that was practically delivered to their doorstep was a huge improvement compared to their previous fruitless searches. The leader and his group, in high spirits, continued forward. "Just one more big one, and we're back," the leader said to the others with a smile. But before he could finish, a rabbit-like creature appeared ahead, silencing him completely. He stared wide-eyed in astonishment. "What's going on? We just encountered one injured guy, and now another one." With a puzzled look, the 6 of them easily captured the relatively harmless, but fast, animal. They stared at the 2 creatures with amazement, their expressions filled with wonder. "So easy. If only it could be like this every day," Ki exclaimed from the group. The others grinned at this, though they thought Ki was dreaming. They couldn't help but share the same hopeful fantasy. The 6 continued on their way, and after walking for another 10 minutes or so, another small animal appeared before them. The animal froze upon seeing them, then, a few seconds later, its eyes wide with terror, tried to run away. After easily catching it again, the 6 exchanged wide-eyed glances. They sensed something was wrong. Once or twice could be attributed to luck, but the 3rd time, something was strange. This, several people in the group subconsciously swallowed, somewhat frightened. This is, Su-Yun, hiding inside the leader's body, was also astonished. Compared to the leader and the others who couldn't understand what was happening, he had an uncertain guess. A hidden character effect. Could it be good luck? The possibility of this blessing character's effect delighted him. Judging from the previous incidents, the leader and the others' luck was indeed unusual. No wonder I felt that power was so obscure. It was actually the power of fate, Su Yun muttered to himself. But let's see. If the leader continues to have this much luck, then it's basically confirmed. The leader suppressed his surprise and hesitantly offered a guess. Do you think if we continue on this path, we can continue hunting? This idea brightened the others' eyes, and they all agreed. The leader's suggestion is good, let's try. The leader laughed loudly, had someone carry the prey, and they continue their search for prey. Perhaps it really was good fortune in the dark influencing them. They hadn't walked for long when they suddenly heard a series of beast roars coming from ahead. A look of surprise flashed in everyone's eyes. It was really coming. They cautiously approached the source of the sound. From afar, Su Yun saw a pack of over a dozen wolves surrounding a large wild boar nearly a meter tall with 2 tusks. They appeared to be locked in a standoff. Upon closer inspection, both the boar and the wolves were wounded and covered in blood, a gruesome sight. Several wolves, in particular, lay motionless in pools of blood, their fates unknown. They hadn't been there long. The two, panting heavily, seemed to have noticed them, ceasing their fighting and watching them warily. The leader hesitated, unsure how to handle the situation. Neither the wolves nor the boar seemed to be people they could easily mess with. Things could easily go wrong. I should have come later, the leader lamented. If he had arrived later, he might have encountered the already weakened boar and wolf pack, and the spoils would have been far too much to carry. Just as he was thinking this, a new development occurred at the scene of the battle. Among the dozen or so wolves, the largest and most imposing, seemingly fierce and awe-inspiring, suddenly howled loudly several times. The alpha wolf gave the wild boar in the group a deep look, sniffed the air, and then, perhaps out of fear, the pack slowly retreated. After retreating a short distance, they turned and ran away. However, before leaving, the alpha wolf gave the wild boar a hateful look before disappearing with the pack. Only the large black wild boar, panting heavily and with bloodshot eyes, remained. It wasn't afraid, relying on its thick hide. The damage inflicted by the wolves had been minimal, but the wounds on its body still ached, fueling its rage. Because of its fear of the wolves, it hesitated and watched them leave, then transferred its anger to these seemingly fragile creatures before it. Opening its mouth wide, it let out a huge roar, lowered its head, pointed its tusks at its leader and the others, and charged forward with all its might. No! Run! The chief shouted in alarm. Without his warning, the others turned and fled the moment the boar charged. The chief hesitated, then his eyes hardened, and he gripped his stone spear tightly. He wasn't going to run. Whether for his people or because of his divine blessing that had greatly increased his strength, he was filled with a burning desire to test his power. Holding the stone spear, he easily dodged the boar's charge, thanks to his blessed state. As he dodged, the spear pierced the boar's flesh. Ouch! The boar groaned in pain, a flash of blood-red light in its eyes, successfully drawing its hatred to the chief. The chief, however, wasn't pleased by the groan. Instead, he stared in surprise at the spot where the spear had struck. With his strength several times greater than usual, a third of the spearhead had penetrated the flesh. Although it looked fine, the wound wasn't what he had expected. He had thought he would inflict a serious injury on this behemoth, but it was only a minor injury. Before he could think, the boar turned and furiously tried to butt him with its tusks. Having dodged the attack again, the chieftain channeled the amplified power of light within him and imbued it into his stone spear. Taking advantage of the boar's charge, he roared and leaped into the air. His body soared high, the stone spear aimed straight for the boar's head. Thud! With the aid of gravity and the power of light, the spear successfully pierced the boar's skull. Blood splattered. Ow! The boar's eyes widened, and it went berserk, frantically shaking its head, trying to shake off whatever was standing on its head. The chieftain gritted his teeth and held on. The boar howled and persisted for a while before suddenly collapsing to the ground with a thud. Panting, watching the massive creature convulsing, spitting blood and barely breathing, the chieftain felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement. He succeeded. He had killed a creature he would never have dared to dream of, one he would have run away from. Just looking at it, he could hardly believe his eyes. But he knew it was all thanks to God's blessing and his status as a divine warrior that he was able to defeat this behemoth. At that moment, his heart was filled with reverence for God. Not long after he defeated the behemoth, The other 5 people who hadn't run far after seeing their leader's actions also came running over. What a huge beast, the leader is amazing, everyone praised and marveled at the giant boar. The leader blushed at the praise and smiled modestly and embarrassedly. It's all thanks to God's blessing, I was just lucky. Faced with the leader's modesty, everyone couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, they looked at the several wolves lying beside the giant boar, feeling a bittersweet mix of pain and pleasure. There are too many, we can't possibly carry all of them back, he said with distress. The chieftain thought for a moment, I'll carry this big guy, you guys take the rest, let's go back. This trip had been incredibly fruitful, they couldn't carry all the boars if they continued hunting, so they decided to head back. Hurry up, the smell of blood here is too strong, the chieftain urged his men. He bent over, his arm veins bulging, his body even gleaming slightly, and with a roar, he lifted the wild boar. The others stared in disbelief, they thought he was just joking, but the chieftain had actually lifted the massive creature. Hurry up, the chieftain urged again, showing signs of strain. Okay, the men quickly began cleaning up the wolf carcasses on the ground. Not long after they left, a pack of wolves suddenly appeared. The alpha wolf walked to the pool of boar blood, sniffed it, and a bloodthirsty glint flashed in its eyes. Howling at the alpha wolf, they followed the scent to the chieftain and his men. Seeing the boar being carried, they hesitated and stopped their pursuit. Hidden within the chieftain's body, Su-Yun happily confirmed one thing. It really is good luck. One after another, the chieftain and his men had almost caught the equivalent of 3 or 4 days' worth of loot. It was too abnormal, their luck was just too good. As the chieftain and his men carried the prey back, the tribespeople gasped in astonishment once more. When they inquired about the specific reasons, they were even more shocked. Wounded prey? Prey that practically delivered itself to their doorstep? And prey that had both sides injured? These events sounded like a dream. If it weren't for the animal carcasses, they would have almost thought the chieftain and his men were lying. The old priest fell into deep thought, muttering to himself, the chieftain's blessing from the gods truly brought him good luck. Everyone paused, then suddenly understood. Blessing, luck? No wonder. The tribespeople had been harboring beautiful fantasies that the phrase "May God bless you" might bring good fortune, and they never expected it to actually do. In an instant, every tribesperson looked at their leader with reddened, envious eyes. They too wanted to be blessed, they too wanted good luck. Everyone hoped that one day they too would be blessed by the gods. After all, who wouldn't want good fortune? The leader laughed heartily at their gazes. Inside the divine stone space, Su-Yun, watching the excited tribespeople, was also in a good mood. This blessing talisman, judging from the leader's situation, is truly exaggerated in its effect. Even he himself found it hard to believe that a mere blessing talisman could be so extraordinary. Yes, extraordinary. Based on Su-Yun's observation, the leader's luck at that time was almost comparable to the legendary Chosen One, the Chosen One of the world. A typical Chosen One is someone who stumbles upon a rare treasure while walking down the street, or has a treasure fall from the sky and hit them on the head. While the leader hadn't reached that level, he wasn't far off. If it had the same effect on me, wouldn't I also become the child of the world? And a biological one at that, Su-Yun thought with some anticipation. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly felt the blessing effect on the leader of the outside world begin to dissipate. The entire effect lasted only about an hour. Afterwards, he hurriedly began experimenting. After spending about half a day, he basically understood the effect of the blessing characters. Besides the amplification, the luck effect of these characters on him was indeed still there, but the corresponding effect had also weakened. Really not working, Su-Yun's brows furrowed tightly. Unwilling to give up, he began various attempts. After spending quite some time, he actually managed to figure something out. He discovered that when blessing others, he could block out the luck effect, leaving only the strength amplification effect, or he could increase the consumption of divine power to enhance the luck effect of the blessing spell. Through experiments like flipping a coin, he tested that to achieve the same luck as the leader, he had to consume about half of his divine power at once. The effect of that luck had reached its limit. No matter how much divine power was consumed, it couldn't break through that limit. He had tried increasing the effect on the chief, but the effect didn't improve. This result isn't bad, Su-Yun thought, somewhat disappointed, but still in good spirits. He might not have much else, but he certainly had plenty of divine power. After finishing these tasks, Su-Yun suddenly remembered that the Polar Day technique hadn't yet transformed into characters. The Polar Day technique's long casting time was a huge drawback. If it could be cast instantly, its effect on his strength would be greatly enhanced. Time passed, and 2 days later, nothing had changed in the tribe. The chief, the old priest, and others were rapidly growing stronger through the faith crystals, and the seeds planted in the storage bags had already sprouted. In the divine stone space, Su-Yun frowned as he looked at the newly appeared characters. As he honed the Polar Day technique to a certain level, characters had indeed emerged as expected, but the result was somewhat different. Looking at the two interdependent yet independent characters within the divine space, like yin and yang fish, he was somewhat astonished. He hadn't expected that what he thought was one character had become two. Is this one or two? He was a little confused. Never mind, activate it first. Without thinking too much, Su-Yun's mind stirred, and he focused his consciousness on the character, skillfully activating it. The divine spark immediately shot out transparent threads, connecting with the character. As the character changed color upon activation, he understood the meaning of the interdependent characters. Polar Day. Eternal Night. It really became two. Su-Yun's lips twitched. Now the character space is gone again. He originally thought there would be a spare space, but who knew this would happen? But oh well, for such a powerful move, it's already lucky that it could be turned into a character. Su-Yun was only slightly disappointed. Now, I'd better not encounter that god of shadows, otherwise, he smiled coldly, full of confidence in his current strength. He would take revenge on that god of shadows sooner or later. While Su-Yun was thinking, far away, Yu Shengbi and his group slowly returned to the Fire God tribe. Chapter 135 The Surprise of the Fire God tribe. As soon as they arrived at the outskirts of the Fire God tribe, they were spotted by the vigilant tribesmen. The crowd was initially wary, but their eyes lit up when they saw who it was. Lord Arm, you're back. A middle-aged, bearded, burly man, beaming with joy, led his men to surround them. Yes, we're back, Arm nodded with a smile. The others beside the bearded man eagerly asked, Brother Yen, Green Spot, did you bring the goods back? Of course, Green Spot replied, head held high, looking as if he hadn't failed in his duty. The group chatted as they walked into the tribe. Once inside, other tribesmen arrived, surrounding Arm and his companions, bombarding them with questions. The cacophony subsided when the Fire God chief and the priest approached. Before they could even ask, Arm, quite tactfully, reached into his storage bag in full view of everyone and took out everything he had traded from the Yanhuan tribe. When the snowflake salt and white porcelain bowl were brought out, the Vulcan tribe members were amazed, scrutinizing these beautiful and unique treasures. Excellent, the middle-aged Vulcan chief, dressed in brown hemp clothing, with a rugged yet handsome appearance and a full beard, beamed with joy. Beside him, a similarly middle-aged priest adorned with bone ornaments examined the items, his expression also one of satisfaction. The Vulcan chief quickly walked to the snowflake salt, pinched some in his hand, and tasted it. A familiar taste. His eyes lit up. Chief, this time you have to give me a bigger share, the priest beside him couldn't help but say. He was incredibly envious of such treasures. Don't worry, the Vulcan chief replied casually. He gazed at the porcelain bowl and salt, his eyes flashing with desire and possessiveness. Beside them, a group of level 3 divine warriors also stared longingly at the items, hesitant to speak. The priest looked at Arm and the others, asking curiously, tell us about the transaction. Okay, Arm nodded. He slowly recounted the transaction, and when he got to the price discussion, the Fire God tribe members were all surprised. These things are so cheap. Yes, that Yanhuan priest didn't take the opportunity to raise the price, and even gave us a very good price. He's truly a very good priest. The Fire God tribe members were full of praise. Hearing the details, they all mentally gave Su-Yun a good guy card and felt they had made a good deal. A tribe worth establishing diplomatic relations with, the Fire God chieftain concluded with a smile, and the priest beside him nodded in agreement. Clearly, at this moment, the people of the Fire God tribe all regarded Su-Yun as a generous, not greedy, and far-sighted priest, and they all considered frequent transactions in the future. Oh, right, their tribe has some special tools that I thought would be perfect for us, so I took the liberty of exchanging them. Arm seemed to remember something, and before his tribesmen could ask any questions, he took out chopsticks, spoons, and other items from his storage bag. This is chopsticks, He introduced them one by one. What are these for? The priest asked curiously. Let me explain, Green Spot said excitedly. These are for picking things up. As he spoke, he demonstrated, clumsily picking up the chopsticks to pick something up. The fire god tribesmen first understood, then some of them were puzzled and asked, why use these? Isn't it better to use your hands? Arm explained, eating with these is clean and hygienic, you don't have to worry about burning your hands, and the way we use them is very fitting for our status as a large tribe. Hearing his explanation, the others pondered for a moment, and the more they thought about it, the more they felt that Arm was right. These benefits were indeed very useful to the tribe. Well done, the fire god chief praised. The priest nodded in agreement, saying, these things showcase our tribe's status. You all have excellent taste. Green Spot and the other younger members couldn't help but smile at the praise. I'm even more curious about that tribe now. To create these things and such precious items, they must be extraordinary, the priest exclaimed. The other tribes' people were also curious. It was remarkable that a small tribe could possess things that even large tribes didn't have. It made them all want to visit the tribe themselves. Arm spoke up, their tribe has something even more incredible. Before anyone could ask, he continued, when Yen and the others went to the Yanhuang tribe last time, they didn't see any divinely bestowed plants. It seemed that the tribe didn't know anything about them. This time when we went, they suddenly had 3 kinds of edible divinely bestowed plants, and I heard their high-yield types. Hearing this, the entire scene fell silent. Everyone was stunned, then their eyes widened in disbelief. 3 kinds of edible divinely bestowed plants, high-yield types. These involuntary murmurs expressed their shock. Arm, are you sure you're not mistaken? The fire god chieftain was somewhat stunned. Arm confirmed earnestly, it's true. Hearing the confirmation, even they, from a large tribe, were surprised and found it somewhat unbelievable. From Arm and the others' words, that tribe was clearly a small tribe. They were able to produce so many special things at the beginning, and now they even had 3 kinds of seemingly high-yield divine-given plants? My God! That tribe, everyone swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Was it really a small tribe? They all had similar thoughts in their minds. Facing their shocked tribesmen, Arm hesitated for a moment and said, I heard that these are all related to their tribe's god, things bestowed upon them by their god. The fire god tribesmen breathed a slight sigh of relief. So it was related to the god. Although these things were still unbelievable, being connected to the god made them somewhat explainable. After all, in the hearts of these mortals, the god was synonymous with omnipotence. The fire god priest fell into deep thought. The god of the Yanhuang tribe must be very special, the fire god priest suddenly said in a deep voice. Upon hearing this, the tribe's people stopped their murmurs and all pricked up their ears to listen attentively to the priest's words. Of all the small tribal gods I've seen, none have puzzled me as much as this one. This god of the Yanhuang tribe is very mysterious. The existence of this god even gives me a premonition that this tribe will surely rise to the same status as us, a large tribe, under his leadership, the priest said with a serious expression. Chapter 136 Ancient Divine Ruins. What, priest, are you serious? The fire god chief and the others were utterly astonished, as if they had heard something shocking. A large tribe. The standard for a large tribe is at least 10,000 people. Such a stringent standard isn't something every small tribe can achieve. Even their tribe spent hundreds of years, with various opportunities and luck, overcoming countless crises, before finally becoming a large tribe. Yet, in the priest's words, that small tribe could reach the status of their large tribe. What did that mean? Did it mean that it wouldn't be long before that small tribe surpassed them and became a large tribe of equal status? Priest, that's impossible. Yes, it's just a small tribe. How could it be? Various words of rejection and rebuttal arose from the crowd. They felt their long-held pride had been offended. So, subconsciously, they didn't want to admit it. The fire god priest sighed, glanced at the many tribesmen arguing heatedly, and began to analyze. You already know how special this tribe is, don't you? You should know that even our fire god tribe wasn't as special as this tribe at first. It was quite ordinary. But this tribe, he paused, not continuing, but the other tribesmen understood his meaning. The more they thought about it, the more they had to admit that this small tribe indeed had the potential to become a large tribe. In fact, if it could continue its miraculous rise, it might very well become a large tribe, just as the priest said. Thinking of this, their feelings became complicated. Especially the 5 who had personally visited the tribe. The more they thought about it, the more they felt the priest was right. That tribe truly gave off a special feeling. The 3 young men among the 5, Green Spot, Big Strong, and another, couldn't help but recall the guy named Stone. They had taken his boastful words as a joke back then, but now, no matter how unwilling they were, they had to admit that the priest's judgment had rarely been wrong. For a moment, their feelings were a mix of emotions, resentment, shame, and even some dark thoughts. Seeing his people somewhat discouraged, the fire god priest couldn't help but comfort them. "Alright, I've said all this to prevent you from becoming too arrogant, but you also shouldn't underestimate our own tribe. No matter how promising that Yanhuan tribe is, it's definitely many years from now, and there are all sorts of dangers along the way. I'm only talking about the susceptibility to unforeseen circumstances. They might not even succeed. Our fire god tribe has existed as a major tribe for a long time. Even if that tribe has great potential, they can't compare to us anytime soon. Don't put on such a shameful expression," the fire god priest reprimanded. The reprimanded tribesman, far from being upset, beamed with joy. "That's right, we're from a major tribe. Why should we care so much about a small tribe? Who knows how long it will take for them to become a major tribe?" They breathed a sigh of relief, their confidence returning. The fire god priest smiled with satisfaction, having successfully curbed the pride of his tribesmen and made them understand that they couldn't be arrogant. As for the Yanhuan tribe, although he valued them somewhat, as he said, potential was just potential. Unless they reached the level of a major tribe, this small tribe couldn't compare to them. However, that tribe did have potential. And their goods were quite good. The priest instructed, "We can continue the trade with the Yanhuan tribe. Every 30 days, you should take some people there. You can also try to build a good relationship with them." "Okay," nodded. Next, the fire god chieftain and the priest divided the snowflake salt in porcelain bowls, but because the quantity was too small, they weren't very satisfied. In the end, the 2 of them took the lion's share. The other level 3 divine warriors divided the smaller portion, and the others could only look on with longing, pounding their chests in frustration. "Trade more next time." "That's right, we can never have too much of this good stuff," the fire god tribesman complained. Smiled helplessly. "Alright, and the wooden house?" He'd almost forgotten about it and all that. He quickly called to his people, and then, following the instructions from the Yanhuan tribe, they began building the wooden house. With the help of many people, a few hours later, a wooden house, though not entirely finished, was far more beautiful than their current dwelling. "So beautiful, I really want to live there." After it was completed, not only were the fire god tribesmen amazed, but even the fire god chieftain and priests looked at them with new respect, placing even greater importance on that tribe. Inside a fiery red space, a rugged, muscular man of about 30, with fiery red hair and beard, was observing the fire god tribesmen from the shadows. "The god of the Yanhuan tribe? Interesting," the fire god grinned, then fell into deep thought. He had to admit, even by his standards, the things from the Yanhuan tribe were somewhat astonishing, and he suddenly had a strong impression of that tribe's god. Moreover, his thoughts were similar to the priest's, and because he had lived the longest, he had a clearer understanding of just how mysterious and special the tribe and their god were. He also agreed with the priest's estimation of potential. He even believed that the Yanhuan tribe, barring unforeseen circumstances, should be able to advance to the major tribe within 100 years. His own fire god tribe had taken hundreds of years, yet he predicted the Yanhuan tribe would only need 100, demonstrating the importance he placed on it. If the other tribesmen knew, they would be utterly astonished. Perhaps, the exploration of that place could allow him to join in, the fire god grinned, stroking his stubble. Not long ago, his tribesmen discovered a special place. After his and his tribesmen's exploration, they discovered it was an ancient, and perhaps even incredibly powerful, divine ruin. At first, he didn't pay much attention, but later he discovered that it contained various valuable items useful to gods. For example, he was lucky enough to obtain a divine fruit that could expand the storage capacity of divine power. Overjoyed, he naturally continued his exploration. As a result, he encountered great danger. He discovered that many evil creatures existed there. He had only been lucky before, but what he saw later included beings comparable to third-level gods. Please vote for me. Moi. Cap 3 Cap. Chapter 137 The Invitation of the God of Fire. Caught off guard, he was severely injured. Fortunately, the evil creatures lacked intelligence, allowing him to escape. Unwilling to give up, He quickly recovered using his divine constitution and cautiously tried to force his way through several more times, only to fail and gain nothing. He now understood that with his current strength, entering the depths of the ruins alone was far too difficult. Being an impatient person, he grew anxious at the prospect of not gaining anything, figuring his inability to defeat them was due to his lack of strength. He decided to call upon other gods for assistance. With more level 3 or level 2 gods helping, their sheer numbers would surely allow them to penetrate the ruins and reap significant benefits. Acting on his idea, he had already invited 2 level 3 gods and 1 level 2 god he found agreeable. He also found the god of the Yanhuang tribe agreeable and considered inviting him to join, hoping that if they gained any benefits, the god would remember his kindness. Of course, as the one who invited him, he wouldn't do a losing deal, he would take a larger share of the benefits from the ruins. Having considered all this, he mentally sent out an order, instructing the believer named Arm to go to the Yanhuang tribe and inquire whether the person there was willing to join the exploration team. Arm received the order and once again set off for the Yanhuang tribe, this time alone, moving much faster. 2 days later, he arrived at the Yanhuang tribe alone that morning and was quickly discovered by the Yanhuang people. "You are Arm?" One of the guards recognized him, hesitated for a moment, and then looked on in surprise. He glanced at Arm, only to find that he was alone. The other 4 were nowhere to be seen, and his heart was filled with doubt. "It's me." Arm nodded and got straight to the point. "I've come representing our tribe's fire god to convey a message. I hope you can call your priest. I'd like to speak with him personally." "Wait a moment." The man hesitated, then told his companions and hurriedly ran towards the tribe's interior. After finding the old priest, he explained the situation. The old priest didn't think much of it and immediately led some people towards Arm's direction. Suyun, inside the divine stone space, watched with some surprise. He shifted his consciousness to the old priest, then temporarily blocked his own. He wanted to see what Arm wanted. Not long after, Suyun arrived before Arm with his men. Arm's weary expression brightened, and he looked intently at the priest, saying in a clear tone, "Respected priest of Yanhuang, I've come representing the fire god and hope to speak with you privately." After speaking, he glanced at his entourage, his meaning clear. Suyun didn't think much of it and calmly said, "Okay." Upon hearing this, the other tribesmen beside him slightly changed their expressions, wanting to stop him. Unfortunately, they ultimately failed to persuade him and could only reluctantly retreat. However, their eyes, watching from afar, were filled with wariness, fearing that this guy named Arm might threaten the priest. Arm's eyes flashed with admiration, somewhat moved by the calm priest's trust in him. "What is it? You can speak now." Suyun smiled slightly. Arm said, "It's like this. Our tribe's fire god wants to invite your tribe's light god to participate in an ancient divine ruin. I hope you can convey this to your god." Suyun listened to Arm's slow explanation, a look of surprise flashing across his face. The fire god didn't intend to hide anything, having Arm relay the dangers and opportunities of the ruin to him. A divine fruit of vast divine power, such a good thing, Suyun thought incredulously. To be honest, this thing alone was enough to tempt him. Although his divine power was replenished due to the real world, it didn't mean he was without divine power. For one thing, the Polar Day spell and the Enhanced Blessing spell alone were major drains of divine power. A few rounds of these spells would completely deplete his reserves. If the divine fruit the fire god spoke of truly existed, increasing his divine power would be incredibly beneficial to his strength. This alone was enough to make the trip worthwhile. Moreover, from the fire god's words, he clearly hadn't yet ventured deep into the ruins, perhaps even better things awaited him there. As for threats, he wasn't too worried. As a third-level god, if the fire god could escape, there was no reason for him, with his healing abilities, to be trapped inside. Even if he encountered an insurmountable crisis, he could use his last trump card, relying on the little black ball to temporarily return to the modern world for refuge. After a period of time, once the faith is gained, a real-life version of the moon rises east and the moon falls west will unfold, showing that dangerous source what cruelty truly means. Having thought this through, Suyun whispered to Arm, "Okay, don't worry, I'll relay this to our god later." "Thank you." Arm smiled. "By the way, can I ask you something?" Suyun suddenly spoke, about the god of shadows, although he didn't believe the divisive words spoken by the previous follower of the god of shadows. His intuition told him that perhaps this fire god merchant knew something. Arm, who had been relaxed, suddenly tense up upon hearing this, as if he had heard something astonishing. The god of shadows, he looked at the priest in surprise and hurriedly asked, "Where did you hear that?" "Oh, you know," Su-Yun asked, feigning confusion. Arm took a deep breath, calmed himself, and nodded, saying, "That shadow god is a formidable enemy of our tribe. They recently invaded our tribe, and like our fire god tribe, they are one of the major tribes. However, they are different from us. They like to invade others, and the surrounding tribes all despise them." Su-Yun nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. I'll go and tell the god about this. You must be tired from your long journey. Come into our tribe and rest for a while." After saying this, he pretended to be in a hurry and left, leaving Arm behind, hesitant to ask something. The other tribesmen in the distance breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that the priest was all right. They gathered around, but Su-Yun sent them to attend to the traveling merchant, while he himself headed towards the location of the divine stone. On the way, he asked his tribesmen to get some chili peppers and ginger to entertain the traveling merchant, which could also be considered a pre-sale promotion of their goods. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 138. Is this difficult? Arm, filled with doubt, followed the Yanhuang tribesmen into the village. After walking for a while, he couldn't help but ask a middle-aged man walking beside him, "Do you know the god of shadows?" A moment of silence fell over the scene. Fear flashed in the eyes of every Yanhuang tribesman, followed by anger. Arm, watching from the side, found it strange, and a guess popped into his mind. "Could it be, that's a damned evil god?" the middle-aged man said angrily. "Why do you say that?" Arm asked in surprise. "HMPH, why would I say that?" another person beside him sneered. "That evil god invaded our tribe with his people just a few days ago." "What?" Arm stopped in his tracks, his face freezing. He thought he had misheard and exclaimed in surprise, "You said the god of shadows invaded your tribe? You're not wrong, are you? It should be the god of shadows warriors, right? There shouldn't be a god of shadows, otherwise your tribe?" He shook his head, not finishing his sentence. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he was that this person was wrong. The god of shadows was a god of large tribes. If he really came to this small tribe, how could he possibly exist? He guessed that these people must have encountered the god of shadows warriors, which made sense. Moreover, after traveling so far, he hadn't seen any signs of damage to the tribe, further solidifying his guess. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone around him began to refute him. "I'm right, it's the god of shadows. Good heavens, that evil god was terrifying. His shadow almost covered the sky. We were almost scared to death." Hearing the repeated rebuttals, especially the descriptions of the god of shadows' attacks, he hesitated. "Is it really the god of shadows?" he thought incredulously. "But if it really was, how did they escape the disaster?" The god of shadows and his warriors seemed far beyond what this small tribe could possibly withstand. "How did you manage to deal with them?" Confused, he simply asked. He proudly declared, "Of course, it was our great god of light who defeated them. Except for the god of shadows who escaped, all the other warriors were annihilated by our god. This is the price they paid for offending our tribe," he finished, his face filled with anger. Arm was stunned, wondering if he'd misheard. It was one thing before, but this was even more outrageous. The god of shadows, from a large tribe, could be defeated by the god of a small tribe? This was absolutely impossible. His first reaction was skepticism, believing these Yanhuang people were lying. That's impossible. The god of shadows, as the god of a large tribe, could not possibly be defeated by your god of light. Arm shook his head, stating with absolute certainty, not believing them at all. "Is this difficult?" Qi and the others asked curiously. "What's so difficult about it? Isn't it perfectly normal for our great god of light to defeat the god of shadow? There's nothing our god can't do." Because they didn't understand that the gods of large and small tribes were not comparable, and because their great god of light had always given them the impression that nothing was impossible, they didn't understand Arm, nor did they know how special their god was. They simply thought it was a normal thing. "Can't your god of fire do it?" he asked, puzzled. "Arm, how could such an abnormal thing be possible?" Arm wanted to roar. He felt these Yanhuang people were truly ignorant and blindly devoted to their god. However, he didn't discriminate. His own tribe had people like that too. And so, The two sides began to argue, and in the end, neither convinced the other. Qi and the others found Arm inexplicable, not believing his truth, while Arm sighed inwardly, thinking they were talking nonsense. Just as they were arguing, a fragrant aroma wafted into their noses. "What's this?" Arm asked, surprised. It was a pungent aroma, strangely scented, yet somehow mouth-watering. Thinking about it, he subconsciously swallowed. Qi and the others had never smelled this fragrance before. Puzzled, they quickly walked towards the direction the aroma was coming from. When they reached the spot, they saw some women of the tribe roasting meat on earthenware pots, occasionally sprinkling something on top. The strange smell was coming from the roasting meat. "Shui, what are you roasting? It smells so good," Qi asked a middle-aged woman with a weathered face. "These were specially made by the priest for this traveling merchant to taste. It smells so good because of these things." She picked up a few bright red chilies to show them. "These things," the priest said, "are seeds from divinely bestowed plants after they've been baptized." Oh, B was first flattered, then surprised, his eyes shining as he stared at the chilies. Having heard those words, he naturally knew that these seeds didn't have any special effects, but the taste shouldn't be too bad. After mentioning the chili peppers, Shui picked up the ginger, pointed to the simmering blackfish soup pot, and introduced it again. Ub, having eaten it before, knew it was too fishy and didn't particularly like it. Once the grilled meat was cooked, B clumsily picked up a steaming piece of meat from the pot with his chopsticks and, undeterred by the heat, put it directly into his mouth. After only a few chews, his mouth went slightly numb, a strange sensation washing over him, and his saliva began to flow profusely. So, delicious, B's face flushed red, he had never eaten such delicious grilled meat before. After swallowing, he began to pant slightly. It was strange and somewhat uncomfortable, but for some reason, he couldn't stop picking up more meat. One chopstick after another, he simply couldn't stop. His ravenous eating made Qi and the others watching chuckle, finding his appearance somewhat amusing. However, after they too tasted the chili-infused grilled meat, they, with trembling hearts, began scrambling for it. "Mine, don't grab it, slow down," Arm, disregarding his status, shouted angrily. His right hand flashed like a phantom, faster than anyone else's, and in the blink of an eye, he had grabbed another piece of roasted meat. Water watched from the side, a smile playing on her lips. Then she picked up a ceramic bowl and filled several bowls with fish soup. She handed the bowl to Arm first, saying, "Try the soup." "Okay." Arm took the bowl with his free left hand, then glanced down at the milky white fish soup filled with chunks of fish. He hesitated. He hadn't wanted to eat it, the fish was too fishy for his taste. But considering that someone had kindly offered it to him, it would be unreasonable not to try it. So, he picked up the bowl, preparing to force himself to drink it despite the fishy smell. However, after only a few sips, his expression froze slightly. Chapter 139 Priest, you are such a generous person. The fish soup had a strange aroma, but this aroma didn't spoil the soup's natural freshness. Instead, it neutralized the fishy smell it should have had. It not only eliminated the fishy taste but also significantly enhanced the overall flavor. He had never tasted such delicious fish soup before. After his initial shock, he noticed the ginger plant added to the soup. This plant enhances the flavor of the fish soup. Arm's eyes lit up as he looked at the ginger and chili peppers as if they were precious treasures. As a level 3 divine warrior, food wasn't scarce in his tribe, so anything that could enhance the deliciousness of food and bring enjoyment was definitely a treasure. For their large tribe, they had essentially moved beyond the basic pleasure of filling their stomachs and had risen to the higher level of enjoying food. These two items would definitely cause a sensation and become highly sought after in the tribe. No, not just his own tribe. If he traded these items back and sold them at a high price to other tribes, then, as a merchant, in an instant, he came up with various ways to maximize profits. However, all of this was based on the premise that the Yanhuang tribe would sell this plant, so he hurriedly inquired, "Does your tribe have any plans to sell this plant? Our tribe is willing to pay a high price." Although he tried to restrain himself, he couldn't help but show some anxiety in the face of such a good thing. "I'm sorry, we are not planning to trade these things for the time being." Suddenly a voice came from afar, making B pause and turn to look at the source of the voice. Seeing that it was the Yanhuang priest, he asked anxiously, "Why? Our fire god tribe is willing to." Su Yun interrupted him, smiling slightly, "You misunderstood me. What I meant was that the effects of these plants have not yet been seen, And I think it is necessary to discuss the final price later. It's fairer for both of us. B was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized. He belatedly remembered that these two plants were not ordinary plants, but divinely bestowed plants with special effects. With special effects, no matter what they were, the value of these two divinely bestowed plants would definitely increase dramatically. Thinking of this, his tiger eyes instantly filled with a fiery light. This is exactly what their Vulcan tribe needs, Arm pleaded, his face pleading. When the effects of these two plants become apparent, please don't refuse our trade request. Alright, Su-Yun readily agreed. Arm looked grateful. However, Su-Yun was already thinking about how to price the ginger and chili peppers. No matter what, the Vulcan merchants might make a killing, but he certainly wouldn't lose out. Compared to Arm, who didn't know the price of spices, he understood the value of these items much better. Take, for example, black pepper, one of the spices. In ancient times, foreign animal husbandry technology was underdeveloped. Before winter each year, most livestock were slaughtered to make salted meat, leaving only breeding stock. Salted meat was initially edible, but without spices, the taste after a while could be deadly. So in the real world of ancient times, people not only coveted gold and silver, but also pepper. Pepper was more valuable than gold in ancient times, extremely expensive. To put it another way, grabbing a handful of pepper at the market was equivalent to successfully robbing a bank today. Pepper is known as black gold in many countries. Since ancient Roman times, spices have been synonymous with gold in many places, and pepper has long been used as currency in Western countries. Even more remarkably, pepper once sparked fierce battles between Western nations. To seize more pepper, they opened new sea routes. Until the 17th century, they were still fighting over pepper. One could say that the history of medieval Western countries is practically a history of pepper. Similar to primitive societies and ancient foreign times, something that could add flavor to food would certainly be valuable. If managed well, it could definitely generate a continuous stream of spiritual wealth. If you like, I can arrange to send you some chili peppers and ginger. You can take them back for your people to try, which will make our trade easier, Su-Yun suggested with a slight smile. After speaking, he had his people bring some chili peppers and ginger, which they put in small earthenware jars and handed directly to B. This, Arm held the two small pottery jars, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. Such good things, and you just casually gave them to our tribe? Priest Yan Huang, you are truly a generous person. He happily put the items into his storage bag, looking at the priest gratefully. Su-Yun maintained his smiling expression. He had probably guessed Arm's thoughts. What could he say? He could only say that primitive people are truly honest. Don't be fooled by his apparent generosity, even giving away some chili peppers and ginger to the Fire God tribe for free. This was all to let the people of the Fire God tribe taste the benefits of these two things. Sooner or later, unable to bear the bland food, they would be eager to come to him to trade chili peppers and ginger. This is called giving a little sweetness first, casting a long line to catch a big fish. Free things may not be the best, but they are definitely the most expensive. After thinking about this, Su-Yun decided to get to the point. Arm, the traveling merchant, I consulted the god about what your fire god said, and he agreed. That's good. Arm breathed a sigh of relief. Our god of light asked you on my behalf. When will we depart? Su-Yun inquired. After a moment's hesitation, Su-Yun said, if possible, it must be done as soon as possible. But in that case, we must ask your tribe's god of light to appear and come with me to our tribe. He knew this might be somewhat offensive, so his eyes held a hint of apology. Su-Yun closed his eyes slightly, seemingly listening intently, and said, my god has agreed. My god will descend shortly. Priest, where's the god going? The other tribesmen, who had been watching for a long time, couldn't hold back any longer and asked directly. Su-Yun didn't answer. Instead, he first gathered the tribesmen in the center of the tribe and then briefly explained the situation, saying that the god had to temporarily leave. Hearing that the god was going away, the Yan Huang tribesmen were all shocked, and the crowd became somewhat flustered. Priest, the leader wanted to say something. This is the god's decision, Su-Yun said calmly. Just these words silenced the crowd, and everyone swallowed back what they wanted to say. This was the god's decision, they couldn't stop him. Moreover, the god was so powerful that nothing would happen to him, everyone thought with certainty. Chapter 140. Is this really a small tribe's deity? Seeing the expressions on his tribesmen's faces, Su-Yun knew that leaving directly was indeed unwise. Without his combat power, the tribe, currently in a vulnerable state, could easily fall victim to unforeseen events. After a moment's thought, he devised a plan. He decided not to withdraw his consciousness from the old priest for the time being, but to remain dormant within him. If the tribe faced an insurmountable crisis, he could intervene. The gods have already made arrangements, you don't need to worry, Su-Yun reassured them. Just as he finished speaking, the divine stone on the central altar of the tribe suddenly shone brightly. The tribesmen's spirits lifted, they knew the gods were about to appear, and they all excitedly gazed at the altar. Standing beside Su-Yun, Arm, seeing the radiant divine stone, was utterly astonished, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then, with a sudden burst of light, a divine figure, shrouded in radiance and whose features were indistinct, appeared before everyone. Simultaneously, a warm light shone outwards, making the entire scene appear incredibly sacred. Looking at this hazy figure, Arm felt an increasing pressure. Before witnessing the true form of the god of light, he was somewhat speechless at the blind worship of the Yanhuan tribe. But upon seeing the radiant divine figure, he realized why they did so, and felt a deep empathy. If I were from this tribe, I would do the same, wouldn't I? Arm murmured to himself. Arm, what are you saying? Ki asked. Nothing, Arm quickly shook his head. Coming to his senses, he spoke respectfully to the figure in the air, Honorable God of Light, please follow me. Su-Yun nodded slightly. Seeing that the god of light had agreed, Arm breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he made a gesture and led the way. Su-Yun leisurely floated in the air and slowly followed. The Yanhuan tribe below, seeing this, hurriedly followed outside the tribe. Seeing that they still wanted to follow, Su-Yun, possessing the old priest, directly dissuaded them. Watching the departing figure of the god of light, the Yanhuan people felt a sense of loss, as if they had lost something important. In the forest, Arm ran swiftly below, occasionally glancing up at the divine figure in the sky, a look of envy flashing in his eyes. Su-Yun, watching Arm's slow pace compared to his own, frowned slightly. After a moment's thought, he said softly, You guide me, and I'll take you for a while. His holy and melodious voice startled Arm, who, somewhat bewildered, nodded subconsciously. Seeing his nod, Su-Yun said nothing more, simply waving his hand and summoning a burst of white light. The light quickly enveloped Arm, lifting him into the air. Arm was startled and instinctively struggled. Then, he was horrified. What? His instinctive struggle hadn't even budged the white light's hold. He felt utterly insignificant, so small it made one tremble. Although he hadn't used his full strength, he inexplicably had a feeling that even if he did, he might not be able to break free from the white light's restraints. Thinking of this, his heart raced. What did this mean? It meant that this god of light was definitely stronger than him. He was a level 3 divine warrior. Direction. Hearing the voice beside him, Arm mechanically pointed in a direction. Whoosh, hearing the howling wind and watching the shadows of trees flash by, his face was stiff. At that moment, something flashed through his mind. The story told by the Yanhuan tribesmen, the god of shadows seemed to have been defeated by this god of light. Could it be true? Arm murmured to himself. Thinking of this, his heart trembled. He knew it was impossible. The Yanhuan tribe was just a small tribe, and even if this god of light was strong, he was definitely no match for the god of shadows. But at this moment, a thought arose in his mind, maybe it's true. Thinking this, he quickly shook his head, banishing this unbelievable thought from his mind. No matter how much he denied it, a hint of awe flashed involuntarily in Arm Tiger's eyes. Su-Yun was incredibly fast, moving with lightning speed, carrying Arm Tiger towards the Fire God tribe. In about an hour, Arm Tiger covered the distance that would have taken Arm Tiger 2 days. This was even including the time spent getting to know the way, otherwise, the speed would have been much faster. Anyway, Arm Tiger was somewhat numb along the way, constantly thinking to himself, is this really a small tribe's god? Are you sure it's not a god from a large tribe in disguise? He unconsciously compared the fire god to the god of light, and he came to an unbelievable conclusion. Even with his subjective bias towards the great fire god, he couldn't tell who was stronger. We've arrived, Arm Tiger said respectfully, with complex and indescribable feelings. Su-Yun found it strange that the man's attitude seemed to have changed somewhat, but he didn't pay much attention and nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the buildings ahead. He saw a large area in front of him, fenced off with wood, thorns, and other plants, enclosing the fire god tribe's territory. Looking inside, rows of houses stretched across a flat plain, appearing thriving and prosperous. Shortly after their arrival, the fire god tribesmen on guard around the outskirts of the tribe spotted them. The commotion caused by Suyun's appearance was so great that a large radiance bathed the ground. Anyone with eyes could see this unusual and astonishing scene and look up to see them floating in the air. Seeing that they had been discovered, Suyun said nothing and simply placed his arm on the ground. The guards, stunned by Suyun's appearance, snapped back to reality upon seeing someone descend. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was Arm. Arm, you're back. Who is he? Looking at the mysterious Suyun above them, they couldn't help but feel nervous. This is the god of light, invited by our fire god. Don't be nervous, Arm reminded them. A god. Hearing that it was a god, the people were astonished, their gazes instinctively shifting away, no longer daring to look at him casually. After all, even the weakest god was far beyond the reach of mortals like them. Just then, a hearty laugh rang out. Ha ha ha. Welcome, welcome. A fiery red figure was seen rapidly flying towards them from the distant sky. It's a god, the others exclaimed with delight. Suyun, somewhat intrigued, couldn't help but scrutinize the fire god dressed in fiery red. The fire god was now standing a few meters away. He was a man with red hair and a beard, appearing to be in his 30s, with a rugged and muscular build. His muscles bulged, giving him a powerful and imposing presence, exuding masculine charm. While he was observing others, the fire god was also secretly sizing him up, his expression growing increasingly surprised. Chapter 141 The God of Fire's Surprise. The white light surrounding the god of light added to his mystique, and even the faintly visible fabric of his clothes, with its delicate material and exquisite design, astonished him. After all, his own clothes were made of a material imitating hemp clothing and variations of his tribe's simple styles, far removed from modern aesthetics and silk garments. The comparison made him feel somewhat awkward, as if the roles of the large and small tribes had been reversed. The god of light was the god of the large tribe, and he himself was the god of the small tribe. Besides this, the god of fire subconsciously sensed the god of light's aura, only to be astonished to find, I can't sense his aura at all. How is this possible? He was incredulous. He was a third-level god, and normally, when sensing gods of lower power at close range, he could easily perceive the intensity of their auras, unless. Does the god of light possess a divine artifact? Only an artifact with concealment abilities could allow a god of lower power to hide their aura. Thinking of this only possibility that could deceive him, he immediately felt a chill and took the god of light before him more seriously. Suyun watched the god of fire's expression change from curiosity to surprise, then to astonishment, and finally to shock, feeling somewhat bewildered. He naturally didn't know that the god of fire was confused by his aura, even speculating that he possessed some kind of divine artifact. If he knew, he could only say that this was normal. Being at the same level 3, and having deliberately concealed his aura, wasn't it normal that the god of fire couldn't sense him? At this moment, the god of fire suddenly spoke in a rough voice, no wonder your Yanhuang tribe can possess those things. It seems it's not good luck, but because of you, god of light, isn't it, god of light, you are very mysterious and special. Suyun smiled slightly, not replying. But the members of the god of fire's tribe below, hearing the god of fire's evaluation, were now astonished. This was the first time they had heard the god of fire evaluate a small tribe's deity in this way. Astonishment was written directly on their faces, and they involuntarily scrutinized Suyun, trying to discern something about him. What could have made the great god of fire speak so highly of him? Arm wasn't too surprised, in fact, he found it quite natural. A god who could render him almost powerless couldn't be easily defeated. When does the ruins exploration you mentioned begin? Suyun didn't forget the important matter and asked directly. The Vulcan grinned, follow me. With that, he flew quickly towards the tribe, amidst the expectant gazes of the crowd below, and Suyun followed. Soon, the Vulcan led him to the center of the tribe, where a peculiar building stood. The entire structure was 6 or 7 meters high, quite massive. Layers of white rock formed a pyramid-like platform, with a stone palace at the very top. A rather rudimentary palace, perhaps? Anyway, Suyun felt a bit awkward looking at it. He didn't see anything exquisite, the overall impression being rough and rugged. Like a rough and ready house. But that's normal. Given the current aesthetic standards and the level of primitive architecture, it must have taken considerable effort to create this. so being too critical wouldn't be right. Unexpectedly, the fire god suddenly said proudly, "Not bad, right? This was built for me by my people." Not bad. Su Yun could only offer a forced compliment. Meanwhile, another thought was running through his mind. When I have time in the future, I'll personally build a magnificent, exquisite, and enormous palace, the kind that will leave this fire god speechless. There are plenty of temples and palaces in modern times in anime. There's bound to be one that suits me. I can just use my divine power to copy the image in my mind. Simple, convenient, and quick. Follow me, the fire god said, entering the palace first. Upon entering, Su Yun was somewhat surprised. He found it wasn't as dark as he had imagined. Instead, it was filled with light. Various flames burned throughout the palace, illuminating it in a bright red glow. However, even without the fire, it didn't matter, because his own radiant buff upon entering illuminated the palace as bright as day. The fire god sat down on a stone platform, in front of which was a huge flat stone used as a table. He waved his hand to his waist, and some fruits appeared on the stone table in earthenware containers. Su Yun glanced at them and saw the faint glow on the fruit skin. He knew these were fruits from divinely bestowed plants. Try them, these divine fruits taste good. With that, the fire god casually picked up a red fruit and crunched away, taking a large bite, juice splattering everywhere. Su Yun couldn't refuse, so he casually picked up a similar one and took a bite. The moment it entered his mouth, a sweet, mango-like flavor, but even better, filled his mouth, making his eyes light up slightly. Not bad, Su Yun praised. Of course, these are all the best-tasting ones I personally selected, the fire god chuckled, somewhat smugly. Su Yun nodded slightly and said softly, "Let's get down to business." The god of fire's expression turned serious. "God of light, you're much earlier than I expected. The other gods might arrive a little later, so I'll have to keep you waiting." He then showed an apologetic look on his rugged face. Su Yun shook his head, indicating he didn't mind, and continued, "Could you tell me more about the ruins?" "Sure," the god of fire nodded and slowly began to explain. "I haven't explored the ruins very thoroughly, but judging from the traces of construction, they exude an ancient aura. I only guessed from some traces that the structure belonged to a god." Then, a hint of apprehension flashed across his face as he said, "It's filled with all sorts of mindless evil creatures. Although they lack intelligence and only use brute force, those evil creatures are not easy to deal with." "Evil creatures?" Su Yun pondered. The god of fire glanced at him, seemingly worried he might not understand, and explained, "Every night, some evil and cruel monsters appear. You, god of light, should have seen them too. Those are the evil creatures I'm talking about." Su Yun nodded, indicating he understood. "I had my followers tell you before that there are some good things inside the ruins, like those divine fruits that increase divine power capacity, and there's more than one." The god of fire paused, noticing the god of light's interest, and then smiled, saying, "The divine fruit I obtained before was stolen from a divinely bestowed tree." "Oh? Could it be?" Hearing this, Su Yun couldn't help but think of something. "That's right," the god of fire knew what he meant and continued. "There wasn't just one divine fruit on that tree. From what I can count, there are at least a dozen." Su Yun's interest deepened, and he guessed, "I think, god of fire, the reason you didn't take all those divine fruits must be because of some difficulty, right?" Chapter 142 is here. The god of fire nodded in agreement, then suddenly sighed. "Alice, as you said, it's not that I didn't want to take all those good things, it's just too dangerous. Where that divine tree is, there are several evil creatures of equal strength to me. Last time, I was just lucky to snatch that precious divine fruit." He sighed again, his expression full of regret. "For the next while, god of light, you can wander around my tribe. If you don't want to, you can wait here. As soon as the other gods arrive, we'll immediately set off for the ruins I mentioned." Su Yun nodded, "It's alright, I'll wait here then." He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He didn't want to wander around the god of fire's tribe, he couldn't bear the embarrassment. He didn't have a disguise now, and he didn't want to go out and be stared at by those people. Seeing that he had chosen to stay here, the god of fire couldn't just leave, so he also closed his eyes and waited. Meanwhile, in the god of fire's tribe, Arm was chatting with his people. Then, as he spoke, he suddenly remembered something and took out 2 small pottery jars from his storage bag. "Lord Arm, what are these?" Green Spot asked curiously. "These are gifts from the priests of the Yanhuan tribe," Given to our tribe with great kindness, Arm explained, introducing the two items. This is ginger, and this is chili pepper. The translucent plants were revealed, and the eyes of the others, including Green Spot, lit up. Green Spot eagerly asked, "Are they divinely bestowed plants? What are their effects?" "Yes and no," Arm shook his head. "These are merely divinely bestowed plants that have undergone purification. They are not truly divinely bestowed plants and have no special effects." Oh, upon hearing this, the dozen or so people nearby showed disappointment. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Clearly, they weren't very interested in things without special effects and didn't care much about these two items. Arm looked at their expressions and couldn't help but find it somewhat amusing. So, he turned and instructed the other tribesmen to bring some raw meat and some river fish. After a while, amidst the strange looks from the others, he sliced the raw meat and put it in the earthenware pot to grill, while also cooking the fish. Once it was cooked to a certain point, he added some of each of the two seasonings. As soon as the chili peppers were sprinkled on the grilled meat, a pungent and spicy aroma immediately wafted out. Because Arm deliberately added a little too much, the smell became particularly strong, causing those nearby to sneeze. Cough cough cough. "Arm, what are you doing? It's so uncomfortable," the people around complained one after another. Arm couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Perhaps he had put in too much chili pepper? However, for Arm, who had seemingly evolved into someone who couldn't live without spicy food, these complaints were obviously ignored, and he continued to prepare the food diligently. After a while, the people around stopped complaining, because they strangely discovered that the smell, which they should have found repulsive, inexplicably made their mouths water uncontrollably after smelling it for a while. The sound of gulping saliva echoed continuously, and even the Fire God clan members in the distance were slowly lured over by the aroma. The enticing aroma of grilled meat and chili peppers wafted through the air, making everyone's mouths water. Seeing that it was almost done grilling, Arm clumsily used chopsticks to pick up a slice of meat from the earthenware pot. After just a few bites, he couldn't help but show a look of pure enjoyment. The smacking sounds made those around him even more hungry. "Arm, give me a few pieces to try." "Me too." "Me too, brother Arm." After much effort, those around him finally tasted the grilled meat, and their faces lit up with excitement. Compared to the previous grilled meat, which had no seasoning whatsoever, only salt, this flavor was truly unique. After getting used to it a little, they couldn't control themselves. "Delicious, Arm, this is so delicious," Green Spot exclaimed excitedly, his eyes shining. "Is this the effect of that plant? It's amazing." "Yes, don't fight over it." They went crazy, wanting to grab the grilled meat at every turn. As for their previous disregard for chili peppers and their complaints about their pungent taste, those were long forgotten. "What was that? So delicious." Arm, seeing their behavior, violently suppressed the crowd, preventing any major trouble. He enjoyed the grilled meat alone, then filled a bowl with fish soup, savoring it with relish, earning a barrage of complaining glances. Until, another level 3 god warrior appeared, and even. "Arm, what are you doing?" The bearded fire god leader and the fire god priest walked majestically from afar. Arm, finally, after the fire god leader, the priest, and the other level 3 god warriors had all tasted the grilled meat and fish soup, their eyes lit up with astonishing brightness. "Delicious, what is this taste? It's this." After a series of exclamations, their gaze is immediately fixed on the two small earthenware jars containing seasonings. "Arm, what is this?" the fire god leader asked calmly. After Arm explained, everyone was surprised once again. The Yanharon tribe? So these are their things. That little tribe has so many good things. This unexpected answer shocked them for a while. After the shock subsided, the fire god chieftain suddenly coughed a few times and said in a rough voice, "Cough cough. I think it's better to temporarily entrust these two items to me, the strongest one, for safekeeping." "Chieftain," the fire god priest beside him was startled, and upon hearing this, his face immediately turned angry. He sneered, "I refuse. These things should be given to me, who is closest to the god. Only I have the right to do so." "Priest, what nonsense are you talking about?" "You're the one talking nonsense." Instantly, a dispute that was about to break out, with spittle flying everywhere, began. In the fire god's palace, Su-Yun had no idea that his small condiment had almost caused a bloodshed. "It's here." Su-Yun sensed something and suddenly opened his eyes. The fire god beside him looked at him suspiciously and also sensed it. Then he also sensed a special aura outside the tribe. Immediately, he opened his eyes and glanced at Su-yoon in surprise, muttering to himself, "This god of light sensed it even faster than me." The god of fire was puzzled for a moment, then said, "Let's go. Let's go greet him and see which god has appeared." "Okay," Su-yoon nodded slightly. Then, the two quickly flew towards the outside of the palace. Chapter 143 Three Gods. The two flew swiftly towards the outskirts of the tribe. Upon reaching their destination, they saw a young man in his 20s, dressed in blue, appearing in the distance. This young man had a rugged appearance and looked somewhat anxious. Seeing the two of them approach, a look of joy flashed in his eyes. He glanced involuntarily at Su-yoon before turning to the god of fire. "This is the god of rain," the god of fire introduced Su-yoon. Then he introduced Su-yoon to the god of rain. "This is the god of light. You two are both second-level gods on this trip. I think you'll have a lot to talk about." The god of fire grinned. Su-yoon remained non-committal, smiling slightly without saying anything. After speaking, the god of rain turned and flew away towards the palace, leaving the two gods some time to chat. Seeing the god of rain leave, the god of rain's eyes lit up. His initial restraint immediately eased, and he looked at Su-yoon with the gaze of someone who had found a kindred spirit. Compared to the god of fire, a third-tier god who instilled fear in him, the god of light before him felt much more at ease. "Hello," the god of rain greeted him with a smile. Su-yoon nodded slightly in response. The god of rain didn't seem to mind. He knew some gods were like that, and instead of feeling ignored, he warmly approached Su-yoon. "Sigh, I heard that this expedition to the ruins involves 3 third-tier gods, including the god of fire. There are only 2 of us second-tier gods in the team. I think we need to stick together." With a sigh, a hint of fear flashed in his eyes, clearly indicating he might have been badly beaten in the past and developed a phobia of third-tier gods. Su-yoon gave him a strange look, then flew towards the god of fire's palace. The god of rain caught up, continuing to lament. "The requirements for advancing to third-level god include having over 10,000 followers. My rain tribe only has a little over 4,000 right now. I really don't know when I'll be able to advance. I don't know how the god of fire and the others managed to do something so difficult. The more people in his tribe, the slower the growth." The main problem was food. He often worried about food and constantly needed aid from the god of fire's tribe. Thinking of this, he sighed repeatedly. Suddenly, the god of rain asked curiously, "Hey, how many people are in your tribe?" Hearing his rambling, envious words, Su-yoon decided it was best not to discourage him. "Well, my tribe only has a little over 2,000, not as many as yours," he replied vaguely. "Really?" A hint of joy flashed in the eyes of the rain god, who muttered to himself, "Finally found another second-level god, with even fewer people than my tribe." As they neared the palace, he asked one last question, "How can you glow? Can you teach me? What do you look like? Can I see you?" Su-yoon was speechless. This god was far too familiar and talkative, completely at odds with his rugged appearance. Immediately, he quickened his pace and flashed into the fire god's palace. Once inside, perhaps out of fear, the rain god's chatter ceased. "Try it," the fire god invited, pointing to divine fruit. The rain god's eyes lit up, and without hesitation, he grabbed a divine fruit and began to eat. "Delicious," the crunching sounds echoed. Hearing the praise, the fire god grinned happily. Time passed, and after nearly half a day, 2 auras suddenly appeared outside the tribe. "The wind god and the forest god have arrived," the fire god exclaimed joyfully. After saying that, he took the lead and flew off, with Su-yoon and the god of storms following behind. 2 more veteran level 3 gods, Sai, the god of storms, flying behind, sighed, then leaned close to Su-yoon and whispered a reminder, "You have to be careful later." "Why?" Su-yoon asked, somewhat puzzled. The god of storms whispered, "The god of forest is quite gentle, but I've heard that the god of gale has a very volatile temper, just like his authority, unpredictable. We'd better not say anything carelessly later, lest we accidentally offend that guy." Hearing the well-intentioned reminder, Su-yoon didn't agree, but his goodwill towards the god of storms beside him increased somewhat. However, thinking about the words of the god of rain, he couldn't help but wonder, this guy claims to have the power of the winds, but his own storms aren't much better, are they? It's strange, how did the god of rain become so verbose? Just as the 2 gods were talking, they followed the god of fire and quickly arrived before the 2 third-level gods. One of the gods was dressed in green with emerald green hair, a beautiful and delicate face like an 18-year-old girl, and a very good figure. Overall, She looked like an elf. The other was tall, dressed in gray, with thick, bushy brown hair and a beard that almost covered half his face, his expression full of arrogance and impatience. Suyun immediately guessed the identities of these two distinctly different gods. The woman was the goddess of the forest, and the man was the god of the winds. God of fire, the god of the winds greeted the god of fire first, then turned his gaze to the other two gods following behind him. "They're the second-level gods you speak of." His tone was calm, yet subtly arrogant. He looked at them, or rather, at Suyun, who was enveloped in radiance. He glanced at the god of rain but quickly ignored him. He couldn't help it, the radiant appearance was undeniably captivating, stirring a pang of jealousy within him. The god of gale complained to the god of fire, "I must say, you're really strange. Could the three of us third-level gods have made it into the depths of that ruin you speak of? Why add two useless fellows? Not only will we have to share the good stuff with them, but we'll also have to divide our attention protecting these two. God of fire, your decision isn't very good." His words were filled with belittling and disdain. The god of rain's expression darkened upon hearing this, but he couldn't lash out at the god of gale and could only suppress his anger. Suyun's expression remained unchanged. These words didn't ignite his anger. However, his impression of the god of gale plummeted to its lowest point. The god of fire frowned, feeling a bit disgusted by the god of gale's words. If it weren't for the fact that the other was also a third-level god, he would have already lashed out. He pointed at Suyun and the other god, saying gruffly, "This is the god of rain, and this is the god of light. Both of them are very promising gods. I think they'll soon reach your level." He then looked at Suyun with admiration, "Especially the god of light. I believe that within 100 years, he will definitely advance to the third level. He's a god with tremendous potential. I don't see anything wrong with having them join us." Chapter 144 Spatial Rift. Hearing the words of the fire god, the forest god and the wind god couldn't help but cast astonished glances at them. They had some faith in the fire god's judgment. If he said so, it couldn't be too far off. Especially the god of light, who was shrouded in light and looked very mysterious, made their eyes become cautious. What's so special about this guy that made the fire god say such a thing? The wind god completely ignored the rain god and looked at the god of light with some displeasure. "But whatever, no matter how powerful you are, you'll only be inferior to me for the next 100 years. Thinking this, he regained his arrogant demeanor. The forest god, on the other hand, began to take Suyun and the others seriously. "Since you say so, then so be it. I just hope those two don't hold me back, otherwise I won't save them." After saying this calmly, the wind god fell silent. The god of fire shook his head helplessly, then turned to Suyun and the others, saying, "Don't worry, I'll protect you both." He then turned to the gods of gale and storm, saying, "Let's go." To that ruin, he led the way, flying in one direction. The god of gale impatiently followed. The god of forest turned and nodded to them with a smile before following. "Let's follow too," the god of rain said with a forced smile. After watching Suyun's movements, he flew to his side and continued whispering, "See? I told you that the god of gale's personality was no good." He wasn't wrong at all. He revealed a knowing look, followed by disdain. "What's there to be proud of? He was just born a few hundred years earlier. I'll become a third-level god sooner or later." He said this with confidence, then comforted Suyun, "God of light, don't worry. Did the god of fire say you'll become a third-level god within 100 years? Although I don't know why the god of fire speaks so highly of you, I believe in you." Suyun's lips twitched. He admired the god of rain for being able to ramble on for so long without him saying a word. "By the way, you saw that forest god earlier, right? She's very beautiful, isn't she?" He chuckled. "I heard that the god of fire and the gale both have a bit of a crush on her." "That's true, the forest god is so beautiful. If I weren't just a second-level god, I would have already pursued her." He looked at her with obvious admiration. Suyun remained non-committal. The forest god was indeed quite beautiful, at least more beautiful than movie stars in the real world. Not only were her features exquisite, but she also possessed an extraordinary aura, qualities that humans couldn't match. However, he didn't feel anything special. Honestly, even if she was incredibly beautiful, she couldn't compare to him. A goddess, yet inferior to him, what was there to look at her with special regard? Thinking this, destined to be alone, Suyun ignored the incessant chatter in his ears and quickened his pace. Soon, after flying for only 10 minutes, Suyun followed a god of fire to a peculiar place. Trees surrounded them, but ahead lay a patch of barren, yellowish-brown earth. devoid of any vegetation for several meters. A terrifying, inexplicable sight appeared in the center of the clearing. A special rift. A look of surprise flashed across Suyun's face. Not far in front of them, a jagged chasm nearly 3 meters in diameter, like a giant wound, appeared a meter or two above the clearing. At the center of the special rift was a swirling, silvery white vortex, a sight that instilled fear in anyone. Because no one knew what would happen if they stepped into the vortex, the unknown often brought fear. God of Light, do you know what this is? The gods, including the god of fire, looked at him in surprise. I don't know, Suyun shook his head. God of fire, why don't you explain? He spoke the truth. Although he recognized it as a special rift, he wasn't sure. TCH, the god of Gale curled his lip in disdain. Don't talk nonsense if you don't know. Before he could finish speaking, the god of fire agreed. The god of light's words are quite apt. Spatial rift? That's a good term. Let's call it that from now on. The god of Gale's face froze. The god of fire continued to explain. I don't know how this thing was created. I even tried to destroy it with my own power, but I failed. Upon hearing this, the other gods stared at the special rift in astonishment. Even a third-level god couldn't destroy it? I'll try. The god of Gale was eager to try. Suddenly, he waved his hand and launched an attack. Whoosh! The gale howled rapidly, as fast as wind blades, making the god of rain, who was watching from the side, feel a chill. Boom! To everyone's surprise, this powerful attack struck the special rift without any effect. The rift remained completely unchanged. Even the raging winds were swallowed by the vortex, causing onlookers to gasp. Even Suyun's expression turned grave. He exclaimed, "What an incredibly sturdy special rift! Even a fourth-level god probably couldn't break it." His words were met with unanimous agreement from the other gods. Even the god of Gale, who disliked him, didn't object this time. They knew that even if a fourth-level god was stronger than them, the difference wouldn't be so vast that it was impossible to break. Suyun stared at the special rift, pondering, I wonder if, given time, I can resolve this rift using the symbols of polar day and eternal night. The god of fire and the other gods were completely unprepared for the god of light's idea to destroy something they considered absolutely indestructible without at least 5th-level divine power, and even with a chance of success. If they knew, they would be horrified. The god of fire continued, my people were the first to discover it. After several attempts, they discovered that passing through this vortex leads to a mysterious ruin. That's where we're going. Hearing this, the other gods had already anticipated it, but they hesitated, staring at the object. I'll go first. The god of fire knew that if he didn't go in first, they would likely hesitate. With that, under the watchful eyes of the other gods, he leaped directly into the vortex and disappeared. Seeing the god of fire go in, the god of Gale hesitated for a moment before flying in as well. Next came the god of forest and the god of rain, with Suyun staying behind. He glanced at the special rift and flew to the silver vortex. The vortex quickly swallowed him. The surroundings immediately fell into deathly silence, as if no god had ever visited, exuding an eerie atmosphere. Please vote. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 145 Unexpected Event. Not long after they left, 3 mysterious figures suddenly appeared before the special rift. HMPH, foolish fire god, you didn't expect me to send your people to secretly gather intelligence on you, did you? If it weren't for your people noticing the anomaly and reporting it, you would have gotten all the benefits. The god of shadows chuckled coldly, his face full of smugness. Let's hurry in, or the good stuff will be gone. A man in his 30s with a sinister face, clearly ruthless, said impatiently. God of fear, you're too hasty. Another burly young man in his 20s sneered, his fleshy face full of cleavage. This ruin might be dangerous. If we go in later, they might get injured, and their lives and the benefits will be ours. Hearing this, the god of shadows and the god of fear's eyes lit up, and they immediately agreed. God of blood, your suggestion is excellent, you're so clever, haha. Thinking this, they began to wait and chat idly. God of shadows, did that little tribe god you mentioned really seriously injure you? The god of blood suddenly asked. It's a minor injury, the god of shadows retorted angrily, instinctively offering a defense. Fine, even a minor injury, can a second-level god really defeat you? The god of blood questioned. Yes, that guy is very strange. His tribe has at most a few thousand people, definitely not a large tribe with over 10,000. Even so, that guy still managed to defeat me when I was careless. The god of shadows' eyes darted around, his gaze somewhat evasive. Hearing his confirmation, even the other two gods, who already roughly knew what had happened, showed deep doubt and shock on their faces. Is he really that powerful, a second-level god defeating a third-level god? Even under carelessness, that's impossible, because the difference between the two is enormous, yet the facts are there, leaving them utterly astonished. The god of shadows shouldn't lie about something so shameful, so it must be true. Seeing the strange looks the two gods gave him, the god of shadows felt a surge of shame and resentment. It's all that damned guy's fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have lost face like this, but it's all worth it, because you're dead this time. After thinking this viciously, he continued, if we see that guy later, we must eliminate him immediately, otherwise, once he advances to third-level god, we won't have an easy time. Given that guy's strange strength and his good relationship with the god of fire and the others, if he joins forces after his advancement, we'll be in danger. The two gods, who had been gloating, suddenly changed their expressions upon hearing this, becoming quite ugly. They had almost forgotten this point. Once that god of light grew stronger, not only would the god of shadow suffer, but they would too. This god of light cannot be allowed to live. We'll go in later and, before the god of fire and the others can react, we'll join forces to kill him. That's right, their eyes were filled with killing intent, clearly preparing to eliminate a future threat. And the god of shadow, don't forget the benefits you promised. Don't worry, the god of shadow smiled, a look of satisfaction flashing across his face. Just you wait, god of light, you're dead. As soon as Su Yun touched the vortex, a sense of chaos and weightlessness immediately washed over him. Before he could take any action, his vision blurred, and he found himself in a strange place. Everywhere he looked, there were ruins and collapsed white pillars. Just one glance was enough to surprise Su Yun with the remaining buildings. Judging from their design, they were clearly of a certain standard. Where is this place? Where are the god of fire and the others? He wondered, somewhat bewildered. Logically, the first thing he should have seen upon entering was Vulcan and the others, so why couldn't he see a single divine figure? Something went wrong. If they were to be randomly dispersed upon entering, Vulcan should have mentioned it beforehand. It's impossible for such a blunder to happen. Could it be because of that previous attack? It didn't seem to cause any damage, but it did cause a slight disturbance in space, so the location is wrong. Narrowing his eyes, Su Yun speculated wildly. Turning his head to look around, he was surprised to find that behind him was a scene like transparent glass. The edge of space, Su Yun muttered to himself. It seems that even if the space here is large, it can't be that large. After thinking for a moment, he decided to fly forward to take a look. At the same time, he became more vigilant. He hadn't forgotten Vulcan's warning about the evil creatures. Who knew which lurking lurk might launch an attack? After flying for more than 10 minutes, a faint sound suddenly came from ahead, making his eyes narrow. Carefully flying closer, he saw two strangely shaped and sinister creatures appearing in front of him. One was a large, dark green eyeball surrounded by ethereal, transparent tentacles, looking extremely strange. Opposite it was something resembling a polymer of purple mud, somewhat like a slime. Judging from their movements, they seemed to be confronting each other. Su Yun had just finished observing the two when he suddenly noticed something, his eyes lighting up. Not far in front of the two evil creatures stood a tall, withered tree. If that were all, it wouldn't have been anything special, but what was most striking about the withered tree's branches, besides a few sparse, half-yellow leaves, were the fist-sized, fluorescent, crystal-clear fruits that didn't match the withered tree's appearance. A careful count revealed only 9 fruits on the tree. Divine fruit? It looks quite special, Su Yun thought excitedly. The tree looked withered, but the fruit was the complete opposite, as if all the nutrients had been supplied to the fruit. Are these two fighting over this? Su Yun pondered, then he noticed something amiss with the surrounding environment of the fruit tree. It seemed as if an invisible protective shield was shielding this divinely bestowed tree. He said this because he saw dark green hue inexplicably clinging to the air, as if it were eroding something. The situation was basically clear, and Su Yun subconsciously sensed the auras of both beings. Good, only level 3. He breathed a slight sigh of relief. Gods were always stronger than ordinary creatures, let alone him. He didn't take them seriously at all. Thinking this, Su-Yun casually flew to a spot not far from them. Chapter 146 The Mysterious Tree. The eye monster and the mud monster were stunned for a moment upon seeing him, then enraged. A cruel glint flashed in their evil eyes. The eye monster emitted a dark green beam of light, about the thickness of a fist. The mud monster spewed out a cloud of purple mud, faintly emitting a foul stench. It was clear that being hit by either of them would be disastrous. Although Su-Yun wasn't afraid, he wanted to test the damage, so he dodged directly. Boom. Splat. The beam of light pierced through the half-meter thick stone behind him, and the edge of the pierced stone slowly began to melt like wax. The mud, while not piercing the stone, corroded a large hole, emitting a nauseating stench. Su-Yun was somewhat surprised by the sharpness of these two attacks. An ordinary level 2 god might have encountered real trouble with them. After thinking this, he waved his hand, unleashing an extremely condensed white light that swiftly enveloped the two evil creatures. Roar. Squeak. Sensing a life or death crisis, the two evil creatures roared in terror, instinctively enveloping themselves in a layer of energy as they tried to flee. Unfortunately, with Su-Yun's radiant speed, they were directly forced to undergo a baptism of holy light. Amidst the sizzling sounds, the energy on their bodies seemed to have met its nemesis, instantly dissolving. As the light touched their bodies, wisps of black energy immediately emerged. As the black energy dissipated, the two evil creatures had no time to struggle and quickly vanished. Seeing this, Su-Yun pondered, the power of light seems to be very effective against these things. Huh, what's this? Just then, he sensed a foreign object within the white light of the eye-shaped monster. Sensing that the object was about to dissolve, he immediately stopped the harmful effects of the white light and with a wave of his hand, he retrieved the object. Looking at the dark green eyeball within the white light, he was somewhat surprised. Is this the energy core of that evil creature, or some vital organ? Puzzled, he reached out and took the eyeball, then without a second thought, poured divine power into it. When in doubt, use divine power, he wouldn't care if it broke. The pure, flawless divine power, as soon as it entered the eyeball, was like water dripping into hot oil. The remaining evil power within began to clash with it. In an instant, the eyeball shone brightly, then seemed to melt, while wisps of evil ore continuously escaped and dispersed. After a while, perhaps due to luck, the eyeball miraculously survived, its appearance completely transformed, changing from dark green to a color resembling white jade. Interesting, a sudden inspiration struck him. Su-Yun suddenly pinched the eyeball between two fingers and pointed it in one direction. Whoosh! Accompanied by a violent whooshing sound, a white laser beam, as thick as a finger, shot out like lightning, striking the half-meter thick rock and immediately piercing a small hole. With another casual wave of his hand, the rock wall was sliced off. This attack, according to estimation, was equivalent to the attack of a first-level god. An interesting little gadget. Feeling the divine power of light stored in the white jade eyeball dissipate slightly, Su-Yun's lips curled into a slight smile. Although this thing seemed powerful, it was somewhat inadequate for him now. It was like a castrated version of the golden wheel, only good as a toy. Replenishing his divine power, Su-Yun put away this little thing that might be useful later. How strange, the eyeball has this thing, but the silt doesn't. Could it be random? After pondering this strangely, he turned his attention to the divine tree. Looking at the corner of the protective shield that was faintly corroded, he basically knew that this thing should be easy to break. He condensed a beam of white light and bombarded it. Boom! With cracking sounds, fissures like a spider web quickly spread across the invisible shield. After holding firm for about 10 breaths, the shield shattered with a boom. Specks of fluorescent light filled the air, a beautiful sight. Su-Yun smiled slightly and walked towards the tree of gods. After admiring the divine fruit for a few seconds, he waved his hand and used a white light to pluck one down. Let's test its effects. Su-Yun prepared to eat one directly. Since he hadn't felt any danger, it shouldn't do any harm. Stop, but just as he was about to eat it, a cold laugh suddenly came from afar. Su-Yun frowned slightly and looked over. He saw a man in his 30s with an unfriendly face flying towards him from a distance. Sensing the divine aura emanating from the man, Su-Yun's brows furrowed even more. Hand over what you have. The god of fear looked at the divine fruit in Su-Yun's hand, a greedy glint in his eyes. Good stuff. I didn't expect to encounter such good stuff so soon after entering. What good luck? He stared at Su-Yun with a sinister look, sneering repeatedly. A few minutes ago, he and Shadow had just entered the vortex, never expecting it to scatter them. He was initially annoyed. If he had encountered Vulcan and his group alone, he would have been in serious trouble. But now, all he could think was, great job, otherwise, how could he have stumbled upon such a boon? He had only flown a short distance after entering when he spotted Su-Yun holding the divine fruit in the distance. Upon closer inspection, he was amazed to find a divinely bestowed plant here. Just thinking about it, he knew the divine tree in the ruins was no ordinary tree, and he couldn't help but think he had struck gold. Especially since this guy was so recognizable, he recognized him at a glance. The god of light, whom they considered the first to eliminate. Since they had encountered him, they might as well take care of this second-level god, and then show off to the god of shadow, seeing his displeasure. You're the god of light the god of shadow mentioned? You don't look like much? I really don't know how that guy lost to you. The god of fear's face was full of disdain and contempt, but inwardly he was somewhat jealous and annoyed. I am the god of fear from the great tribe of 10,000. If you know what's good for you, throw me what you're holding, and I might let you go. Otherwise, he chuckled sinisterly, silently waiting for the man before him to throw the divine fruit. He figured that since he had revealed his identity, this god of light would surely be sensible and obediently throw the fruit over. At the same time, he thought to himself, once you throw it over, you won't be leaving. Ha ha ha. The god of shadows, Su-Yun was taken aback. He had been wondering where this god had come from, but now he basically understood. A companion of the god of shadows. Thinking this, his eyes turned cold. He hadn't even gone to cause trouble for the god of shadows yet. And these guys had already found him first. They were courting death. Chapter 147. How can he be so strong? Thinking this, and looking at the god of fear before him, he didn't waste any more words and decided to attack directly. With a wave of his hand, a layer of dazzling aurora, hundreds of meters in diameter and covering the sky, enveloped the god of fear at an extremely fast speed. Healing spell, weakened version. What are these? The god of fear was taken aback. He didn't sense any danger from the light. It seemed to have no offensive power whatsoever. However, just to be on the safe side, when he couldn't dodge in time, he still managed to unleash a gray shield, firmly enveloping him within it. Now you, the god of fear was about to taunt him when he discovered that the green light had actually penetrated the shield and directly shone on him. How is this possible? A look of shock flashed across his face as he stared at this scene in disbelief. Just as he thought of this, he suddenly noticed a detail. He had initially assumed that this god of light was a level 2, but he actually sensed the aura of a level 3 god from these lights. He was stunned. This was even more surprising than the light penetrating his defenses earlier. The god of light was a level 3? Seeing the vast expanse of the green light, he became even more certain of his suspicions. But how could this be? Every third-level god had a large tribe with tens of thousands of people. If this god of light's tribe truly had that many, how could he not have received the news? Along with shock and disbelief, he erupted in fury. God of shadows, you tricked me. The thought of clashing and fighting with a god of this same level filled him with resentment towards the god of shadows. This was a completely different matter from a second-level god. A second-level god could be killed easily, but fighting a third-level god could mean certain death. Wait, my body. Suddenly, the god of fear felt a sudden, startled realization that he was weak and powerless. What did you do to me? He roared, glaring at Su-Yun. Don't think I'm afraid of you. Even if we're both third-level gods, you won't have an easy time fighting me. After saying that, the god of fear thought of something and proposed, give me half of the fruit from that divinely bestowed plant, or don't even think about me leaving. In his mind, even if this god of light was only third level, he was at most a newly promoted one. As a veteran third-level god, he had nothing to fear. Now that he had taken a step back, he figured the god of light would be sensible and choose to settle things peacefully, since his chances of winning in a fight were definitely higher. The god of shadow is really useless. He can't even beat a newly promoted third-level god, he thought with disdain and mockery. But before he could continue thinking, a strong sense of crisis suddenly came over him, startling him back to his senses. Su-Yun thought the god of fear was going to say something, but it turned out to be just a bunch of nonsensical words. He made his move directly. Golden wheel, with a soft murmur, a fist-sized golden sphere appeared in his hand. The next moment, he aimed it at the god of fear and fired it. Boom! A shrill sound rang out as a golden beam of light shot out at incredible speed. What? The god of fear's face paled in horror. He didn't have time to completely dodge, and in the nick of time, he activated a divine spell. Fear ray. A ghostly green ray barely met the golden wheel's light. Upon impact, the two forces momentarily clashed, but the ghostly green ray immediately retreated, utterly powerless to retaliate. The god of fear was incredulous. Even if his attack was mentally focused, it shouldn't be so easily defeated. How could the difference in power be so vast? The god of fear, unable to dodge in time, screamed in agony as a bloody hole pierced his shoulder. Divine blood gushed from the wound, only to be instantly scorched black by the intense heat. The god of fear gritted his teeth, enduring the pain as he forcibly tore the wound open. At the same time, he shouted in disbelief, "How could you be so strong? They were both third-level gods, they should be about the same strength." This god of light was abnormally strong. Looking at the pursuing golden pillar, he dodged with a look of horror. With his rich combat awareness, he waved his hand, and a large amount of gray mist formed from divine power surged outwards, quickly covering and spreading in all directions. At the same time, he didn't forget to conceal his own aura, afraid of being sensed by the god of light. After doing all this, he breathed a slight sigh of relief, then gritted his teeth and thought, "I actually mocked the god of shadows, damn it, where did this freak come from? That guy could escape, should I say he's lucky." While terrified, he also secretly hated the god of shadows. "It's all that guy's fault, otherwise I wouldn't have offended this monster, damn it." Su-Yun looked at the thick gray mist, unable to sense any aura, and his brows immediately furrowed. Without thinking much, he directly dispersed the golden wheel in his hand and then used another move. Holy Flame. The moment the flame symbol within his body was activated, a massive surge of milky white flame erupted into the sky. Compared to the previous attack range of 10 or 20 meters, the flames now instantly transformed into a raging sea of fire hundreds of meters wide, a sight that instilled fear. The flames surged forward, gaining the upper hand the moment they touched the gray mist. Even the gray mist, seemingly countered by the holy attribute, melted away like ice and snow. The god of fear, hiding within the gray mist, cursed inwardly, "No, I have to run. This guy's authority can actually counter me, damn shadow god, how dare he trick me like this?" Without another word, he fled for his life, scattering gray mist as he went, constantly shifting his position, fearing another hit from that terrifying attack. Su-Yun frowned slightly. What a despicable guy. He quickly gave chase, simultaneously firing golden wheels at the gray mist whenever the opponent released an attack and revealed its aura. The god of fear felt a chill run down his spine, sensing the intense danger. He used all his strength to dodge the golden pillars. Several times, his pupils constricted as he watched the golden pillars brush past him, tears welling up in his eyes, his face a picture of utter despair. Monster, this is truly a monster. Is this god of light really a level 3 god? Or could he be a level 4 god on disguise? Damn it. That damned god of shadow, don't let me see you again, or I will definitely take my revenge. With that thought, the god of fear suddenly gritted his teeth, pulled a black bead from his storage bag, and after a moment of heartache, threw it behind him. What is this? Su-Yun stared in surprise at the flying black ball, but before he could even be alert, the black ball exploded with a bang. A thick black mist, about 10 meters in diameter, surged out from it and enveloped him. Su-Yun's expression changed slightly. For a moment, he felt as if he were trapped in a swamp, making movement extremely difficult. Even using the holy flame to destroy it took 7 or 8 seconds. It escaped. Su-Yun's lips twitched slightly. Third-level gods are indeed not simple. There are even strange things like that. He felt a pang of regret, but didn't choose to continue searching. The divine fruit was more important now. After all, the god of fear wasn't the god of shadow, and his hatred wasn't worth abandoning the divine fruit. Thinking of the divine fruit, his expression changed instantly. Although the chances were slim, if that guy went back to retrieve the divine fruit, it would be a huge loss. Thinking this, he disregarded everything else and quickly turned back. Finally escaped, the god of fear, seeing no god chasing after him, breathed a sigh of relief. If I encounter that monster alone again, I'll definitely run as far away as possible. God of shadow, you dared to deceive me by saying that monster was a second-level god. You just wait, he thought angrily, preparing to search for the god of shadow and take revenge. Su-Yun returned to that area and, seeing that the remaining 8 divine fruits on the withered tree trunk hadn't disappeared, breathed a sigh of relief. He reached into the storage pouch given to him by the traveling merchant at his waist, and a crystal-like divine fruit immediately appeared in his hand. Finally, I can test its effects. With a troublesome fellow gone, He took a bite of the divine fruit. A sweet, pomegranate-like flavor filled his mouth. It tasted quite good. After quickly devouring the fruit and storing the eyeball-sized seed in his storage pouch, he quietly began to experience its effects. Less than half a minute later, Suyun's expression changed slightly. He suddenly noticed something. Without a word, he immediately shifted his attention to his divine core space. He saw that the 19,000 threads of faith that had accumulated at the base of his divine core, along with nearly 20% of the emerald green energy, had instantly increased to 20%. The overall divine power had also increased slightly. After checking it 2 or 3 times to make sure he wasn't mistaken, he was shocked. This fruit can actually enhance divine status? It increased the number of followers by about 1,000 at once, skipping the believer stage entirely, he thought incredulously. Doesn't this mean that with enough of these fruits, I could advance to level 4 without needing followers? He gasped, staring at the seemingly ordinary divine tree in astonishment. As expected of a divine relic, it even has something like this. After exclaiming in admiration, he suddenly noticed something. Wait, something's not right. He noticed that while consuming the divine fruit increased his divine status, the emerald green color should have increased slightly, given the rapidly growing threads of faith. However, to his perception, there was no change in his divine status whatsoever. His expression changed slightly as Suyun guessed the problem. Eating this fruit is equivalent to gaining 1,000 more followers in advance, but to advance further, I must make up for those 1,000 more. Isn't this similar to the situation where I lost 1,000 followers? Thinking of this, he sighed inwardly. It feels a bit useless. I can only use it for breakthroughs, right? Although it was somewhat useless, Suyun still took the other 8 divine fruits without leaving any and put them into his storage bag. This thing was nothing special to him, since gaining followers was too easy, but to others, it was a treasure. For example, the god of rain, if he had these 8 divine fruits, wouldn't he advance directly? The legendary get on the train first and buy the ticket later was a huge profit for a second-level god. If only it were 10,000, Suyun sighed regretfully, then pondered, later, I'll take these fruits to the god of rain or the god of fire and exchange them for the kind of fruit that can increase divine power storage. I don't think they'll refuse. Compared to this kind of divine fruit, the other kind was clearly more suitable for him. Looking at the withered tree, Suyun felt an urge to uproot it and rake it up from the ground. Unfortunately, my storage bag isn't big enough. Suyun shook his head. His storage bag was only about 2 meters in diameter, clearly insufficient to hold this 3 or 4 meter tall withered tree. Oh well, I'll just leave it here for now and take it with me when I leave. With that thought, he prepared to continue exploring the ruins. He'd already obtained something good in such a short time. He wondered what else was hidden in these ruins. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck him. He seemed to have forgotten something. Blessing spell, child of the world, I almost forgot. Suyun's eyes lit up. In that instant, he felt like he'd missed out on a fortune. If he had used the blessing spell earlier to increase his luck, he might have gained even more. After a moment of regret, he immediately used the blessing spell without thinking. Blessing spell, enhanced luck version. As the characters activated, the divine power within him surged, instantly consuming about half of his divine power. Combined with the losses from the previous battle, his divine power was nearly exhausted. A dazzling light enveloped him in the blink of an eye, making his surroundings even more radiant and dazzling. Along with a 20% increase in strength, a mysterious and subtle power began to entwine around him. Something seemed to have changed. Huh? He exclaimed in surprise immediately after casting the spell. He had been choosing a direction, but perhaps due to luck, he suddenly had an intuition that going to the right was the right thing to do. Suyun's expression was strange. This feeling is really strange. It was an exaggerated analogy, as if a consciousness was reminding him, something like that. Son, head that way. There's something good there. Suyun's lips twitched slightly. I feel like I should buy a lottery ticket. Maybe I should go back and try. He wondered if his luck would improve further. Perhaps a legendary thunderbolt or meteorite would descend to annihilate his enemies? Would he transform from Hiruxiu into real Zor? After thinking about it, he immediately flew in that direction. He flew for about 10 minutes, and whether it was luck or not, he didn't encounter a single evil creature. What's this? As he flew, he stopped. In the ruins not far away, under a collapsed wall, a corner was vaguely visible, seemingly a box. With a strange expression, Suyun slowly flew over. Thank you. Let the past be the past for the 100 book coins reward. Chapter 148. The Chosen One's First Experience. He unleashed a white light, lifting the wall to reveal a small, palm-sized box that resembled jade. No, it was more like a container than a box. He pulled the box from the ruins, examining it with curiosity. This material is quite special. What's inside? Driven by curiosity, he opened the box. As soon as he opened it, a peculiar aura leaked out, causing Suyun's expression to change slightly. Looking at the contents, he exclaimed in surprise, "Faith crystals." These were milky white, crystal-like crystals filled with flowing white gas. Moreover, compared to the first and second level faith crystals he had seen, these were far more abundant and of much higher quality. After carefully sensing them, Suyun roughly calculated the amount of faith power within each crystal. It was equivalent to several tens of times that of a second-level faith crystal of the same level. This amount left him somewhat stunned. If I'm not mistaken, this should be a level 4 faith crystal based on the level 1 and level 2 content. Thinking this, he suddenly felt like he was finding money on the street, or a windfall. He'd struck gold. What was the difference between this and finding money? Feeling his almost depleted divine power, he subconsciously picked up a crystal and crushed it in his fist. A surge of unclaimed faith power erupted, quickly absorbed by Suyun. After being transformed by his divine essence, his divine power surged like a tide. In half a breath, his divine power had recovered to slightly more than half. Opening his palm, looking at his empty hand and feeling the half-recovered divine power, he was astonished. Just 2 of these are enough to fully restore my divine power. This answer filled him with joy. What did this mean? It meant he could quickly replenish his divine power in battle, and the terrifying consumption of divine magic was now temporarily resolved for him. Carefully counting the level 4 faith crystals, he found that the small box contained 11 in total, plus the ones he had already consumed, making 12 in total. These 11 pills are more than enough to fully restore my divine power 5 times. Blessing spell, truly terrifying, Suyun muttered to himself. This is what it feels like to be a chosen one. After thinking this, he put the special box into his storage bag. Then, adhering to the principle of not wasting anything, Suyun directly activated the small black ball. Relying on the power of modern faith, he restored the remaining half of his divine power and continued flying forward. While flying, he pondered things. I wonder where Vulcan and the others are. Judging from the spatial barrier behind me, this should be the outer perimeter. The further I go, the closer I'll get to the depths of the ruins. I should be able to encounter them then. Thinking this, he increased his speed. Along the way, he encountered low-level evil creatures, which he easily dealt with. During the process, he paid a little attention and found that apart from the eye monster, the others were either too low-level, or only rare evil creatures could give birth to such things. In any case, he didn't obtain anything. A dozen minutes later, while flying, Suyun suddenly sensed an energy fluctuation ahead, accompanied by occasional sounds. There's a battle ahead. Surprised, he quickly flew in that direction. He soon arrived at his destination and saw a familiar figure fighting 5 strangely shaped evil creatures. Sensing their auras, he realized they were all level 3. In the air, fine droplets of water hung suspended, pausing briefly before transforming into countless fine needles that surged towards the 5 evil creatures. Roars. Evil howls echoed. Although the rain god was powerful, it was no match for so many level 3 evil creatures and was easily repelled. Not good, the rain god thought bitterly. Too many. I have to run. Although fleeing was unwilling, he knew that any one of the level 3 evil creatures here was equivalent to him in strength. Perhaps they were slightly weaker in a one-on-one fight, but there was no qualitative difference. He was essentially fighting 5 equally powerful evil creatures, a battle he couldn't possibly win against. A barrage of dark green attacks rained down on him. Terrified, he turned to flee, only to see a dazzlingly familiar figure ahead. The god of light. His face lit up with joy at first, but then, remembering the 5 evil creatures chasing him, he panicked and cried out, "Run!" Seeing Suyun still standing there, seemingly oblivious, and fearing he wouldn't realize the gravity of the situation, the god of rain continued shouting, "These are 5 level 3 evil creatures. We can't handle them. Run!" The god of rain had already flown to his side, panicking, "What's wrong? Those are 5 level 3 evil creatures. If you don't leave, you're dead." Seeing him still unmoved, he wondered, is the god of light going to fight these evil creatures, He thought the god of light was probably unaware of their power and had become arrogant. Unfortunately, these evil creatures were beyond the capabilities of the two gods. After a moment's hesitation, he gritted his teeth and thought, I'll fight. With the strength of the two of us, even if we can't win, we can at least hold out for a while. He figured that after the fight, the god of light, seeing that he couldn't defeat these evil creatures, would listen to him and flee together. Seeing the 5 evil creatures approaching, he nervously prepared to make his move. But just as he was about to act, Suyun, standing beside him, acted first. Holy flame, a soft voice rang out. The god of rain was stunned. In that moment of hesitation, with a boom, a towering white flame hundreds of meters long burst into flames. The flames quickly surrounded the 5 evil creatures. The flames, carrying a terrifying holy aura, terrified them, and they each used energy shields to try and defend themselves. But unfortunately, the surging flames not only countered them, but were also a whole level higher than them. How could they possibly resist? With just a slight contact, their shields melted and shattered, and for a moment, shrill screams filled the air. The god of rain, hearing the voice beside him, stared blankly at the evil creatures reduced to ashes. He was dumbfounded, his mind a complete blank. Am I hallucinating? Yes, I must be hallucinating, he muttered to himself. Otherwise, how could he have seen someone who, like him, was a level 2 god of light, instantly kill 5 equally powerful evil creatures? No, that's not right. Only then did he belatedly realize that the aura of those flames was incredibly powerful, the aura of a level 3 god. Chapter 149 God of Light, are you a level 3 god? After confirming several times, he was filled with shock and exclaimed in disbelief, God of Light, you're a 3rd level god. Suyun stared at the empty flames, turned to look at him, and nodded slightly. Hiss, the god of rain gasped, and after receiving confirmation, he smiled bitterly. I actually thought you were a 2nd level god before, and even the god of fire and the others didn't realize you were 3rd level. Recalling the previous scenes, he almost lowered his head in shame, wishing he could find a hole to crawl into on the spot. Especially before, when he told the god of light, who was a 3rd level god, God of light, don't worry, didn't the god of fire say that you will become a 3rd level god within 100 years? He believed in him and said things like he would definitely succeed. Thinking of these words, he felt extremely embarrassed and ashamed. The god of light was already a 3rd level god, why would he need 100 years? Wasn't this a joke? I even asked you to run with me before, haha, the god of rain chuckled, trying to get rid of the current awkward atmosphere. He said, no wonder you could kill those level 3 evil creatures so easily. I thought you were a monster too, killing them with only level 2 strength. It scared me to death. Turns out you're a level 3 god. He let out a soft breath. Compared to defeating so many level 3 evil creatures with level 2 strength, the answer of being a level 3 god was much more acceptable and natural to him. Let's go find the fire gods. Suyun glanced at him and said calmly. After speaking, he flew towards the depths of the ruins ahead. The god of rain was stunned and quickly chased after him, looking at the god of light not far away, with some awe and a trace of unease in his eyes. After changing his identity, his instinctive awe of a level 3 god made him somewhat hesitant to be as familiar and talkative as before. After flying for a while, the talkative god of light, feeling a bit stifled, finally couldn't resist asking out of curiosity, God of light, why haven't I heard of your tribe? Logically, a tribe with over 10,000 members should be quite obvious. Even if he hadn't heard of it, the god of fire and the others should have. Those large tribes had vast territories, how come even they hadn't discovered it? Suyun shook his head. Seeing that he had no intention of answering, the god of storms didn't dare to continue. Every god had their own secrets, and he dared not infringe upon the god of light's privacy. As they flew, the god of storms, seemingly lost in thought, felt a surge of schadenfreude. He recalled the god of gales' earlier mockery. I really want to see the god of gales' expression then, it'll be quite a sight. The god of storms chuckled, noticing Suyun looking at him strangely, wondering what was wrong with him. Just then, Suyun suddenly stopped. What's wrong? The god of storms asked, puzzled. There are 2 level 3 evil creatures ahead, Suyun said softly. Up, the god of rain paused, then quickly said, should we go around it? He glanced at Suyun, somewhat embarrassed. No need, Suyun shook his head. The god of rain was immediately overjoyed, thinking he would step in to clear out the evil creatures. He couldn't help but think, It's good that the god of light is here. Those level 3 evil creatures won't be a problem anymore. But before he could finish his thought, a faint voice continued, those 2 evil creatures will be yours to deal with later. The god of rain was dumbfounded, thinking he had misheard, and exclaimed in astonishment, me, that's right. Hearing the confirmed answer, he subconsciously swallowed. He wasn't afraid of a one-on-one fight, but he wasn't confident against 2, and the possibility of losing was even greater. Forcing himself to speak, the god of rain said somewhat awkwardly, but my strength. He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. He dared not be reckless, otherwise, if he really faced 2, he would truly be in tears. Don't worry, I'll add something for you later, it should be enough to defeat them. Su-Yun glanced at him and said calmly. What is it? The god of rain asked. Su-Yun didn't speak, and soon the 2 arrived in front of the 2 evil creatures. One was a ghostly green and transparent creature, like a Teru Bozu doll. The other was a strangely shaped head floating in the air, both looking rather eerie. At this moment, they also noticed the 2, staring at them with cruel eyes, looking as if they were about to attack. Are we really going to go? The god of rain asked hesitantly. Let's go, Su-Yu nodded. Alright, the god of rain gritted his teeth, thinking that the god of light wouldn't abandon them when they were in danger, so he flew over directly. Let's see its strength first. Su-Yun watched carefully. Rainstorm technique. A somewhat rough voice shouted. As soon as the words fell, countless fine needles made of rain appeared in the air, covering an area of several tens of meters, which could be considered a powerful display. With a flick of the rain god's finger, the demon charged menacingly towards the 2 level 3 evil creatures. A blue light flashed in the head monster's eyes, and a deep blue ice shield immediately appeared in front of it, clearly intended to block the attack. The ghost monster grinned wickedly, then moved swiftly, ignoring the incoming attack and charging straight at the rain god. Whoosh! 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 Rain needles struck the ice shield, piercing small holes, completely lacking the gentleness of water, instead displaying incredible ferocity. Unfortunately, given the relatively equal strength, the ice shield stubbornly withstood the attack. The ghost monster, however, was even more astonishing. The rain needles struck its body, yet they passed right through. What? The rain god exclaimed in shock, quickly increasing the distance between himself and the ghost monster. This evil creature was strange. He could feel the rain needles passing through its body, while not completely ineffective, the effect was minimal. At this moment, the evil creature still seemed ready to charge, clearly indicating something was wrong. He dodged and attacked intermittently, but the fight became increasingly difficult, and he was heavily suppressed. He was accidentally grazed by the ghostly creature, and suddenly froze, his mind going blank with dizziness. Biting his tongue to regain his senses, the god of rain stared in horror at the ghostly creature, daring not to let it get any closer. It had only grazed him. If its entire body passed through him, he would be at the mercy of the evil creature. He used every ounce of strength, desperately dodging the ghostly creature. As a result, he, already at a disadvantage, was now truly on the verge of collapse. The god of rain struggled to hold on, urgently calling out to Su-Yun, help. Seeing that he was indeed unable to continue, Su-Yun, after a moment of surprise at his weak fighting strength, extended a helping hand. Blessing, with a holy voice, a blessing spell, devoid of any element of luck, was swiftly cast. A dazzling light flashed. Thank you for the 500 Kidian coins. Thank you for the 588 book coins. Thank you. I took the day off yesterday, but found that many people wished me a happy holiday and forgave me. I felt a little guilty. Greek letter Omega. Chapter 150. Did I do this? With a wave of his hand, Su-Yun unleashed a dazzling beam of light upon him. The god of rain was startled, staring at the oncoming light, and before he could even dodge, he was struck directly, his entire body enveloped in its radiance. Before he could even utter a question, he suddenly felt something amiss in his body. A powerful sensation immediately surged within him. Slightly stunned, the god of rain quickly grasped the state of his body. What is this? He exclaimed in shock. He felt that his divine power and everything else had increased significantly, at least doubling. While he was still in a daze, the ghost monster suddenly launched a surprise attack, almost touching him. Normally, he wouldn't have been able to dodge at that close range. However, he instinctively dodged, and as a blur, he vanished from that spot. The ghost monster was stunned, and the god of rain was also stunned, exclaiming in astonishment, "Did I do this?" His face was filled with disbelief. The speed he had just achieved had already surpassed his usual limits, much faster than before. This power, he clenched his fist, feeling the power surging through his body, and unleashed another rainstorm spell, repeating his previous technique. Whoosh! The rainstorm, almost twice the size of the previous one, was incomparable in both range and intensity. The head monster was shocked and quickly erected an ice shield to try and block the fine rain and needles. Unfortunately, the ice shield cracked and shattered with a loud boom. The fine rain, like sharp blades, instantly engulfed the head monster. A mournful wail echoed intermittently, then grew weaker and weaker until it gradually subsided. The rain god stared in disbelief at this scene. My power has increased so much. After a moment of confusion, he realized something. Was it the light emitted by the god of light earlier? He remembered that the god of light had indeed said he would add something to help him. Is this what the god of light meant by adding something, allowing me to easily destroy a level 3 evil creature? The god of storms thought, his face filled with shock. Is this the divine magic unique to the god of light? After experiencing it firsthand, he naturally knew how powerful he was now, and thus understood the god of light's might even more. Just as he was in shock, the ghost monster, seeing its companion dead, instinctively felt fear and tried to escape. However, its movement awakened the god of storms. Trying to run? Too late. Remembering how badly this ghost monster had made him, he was enraged and unleashed his divine magic without hesitation, attacking the ghost monster wave after wave. Even with its immunity to some attacks, the ghost monster howled in agony under this much stronger onslaught, finally being annihilated and dissipating. Done. The god of storms' face lit up with joy, a sense of accomplishment suddenly welling up inside him. These were level 3 evil creatures, each equivalent to the strength of a level 2 god, and he had killed 2 of them so easily. How could he not feel proud? After the initial joy, he naturally didn't forget who had helped him defeat the 2 evil creatures, so he quickly flew over. God of light, thank you, the god of rain exclaimed, then excitedly asked, God of light, what was that like just now? I feel so powerful now, it's amazing. Su Yun smiled faintly, making no attempt to hide his feelings, and directly replied. That was my divine spell, blessing spell. You've already experienced its effects, as expected. Hearing the confirmed answer, the god of rain breathed a sigh of relief, looking at him with awe and admiration, thinking to himself, I never expected the god of light to possess such a powerful divine spell, it's truly enviable. After speaking, Su Yun inquired about his experience in detail, and the god of rain answered earnestly and thoroughly. After hearing the answer, Su Yun pondered, the stronger the power, the lower the amplification. After thinking for a moment, he said to the god of rain, let's go. The 2 gods resumed their journey into the depths of the ruins. Along the way, Su Yun replenished his blessing spell to maintain his exceptionally high luck. Following their intuition, they flew to a place where buildings still stood. Looking at the massive structure, over 10 meters tall, though somewhat dilapidated and broken, it still faintly retained traces of its former glory. Let's go in and take a look, the god of rain exclaimed excitedly. Su Yun nodded, he sensed something valuable inside. They quickly flew inside. The place was desolate and chilling. However, as Su Yun entered, the light emanating from him instantly dispelled the chill and brought bright light to the area. They hadn't been inside long when they suddenly sensed something amiss. 3 powerful auras ahead. Level 4 evil creatures? 3 of them. The god of rain's expression changed drastically upon sensing them, his face filled with terror. Run. Instinctively, he wanted to turn and flee. Whatever was inside, protected by level 4 evil creatures, their best option was to avoid this place. He himself didn't say it, but encountering a level 4 evil creature would be a near certain death. Even the god of light beside him could only withstand 1 level 4 evil creature at most. Under the siege of 3, he would definitely have no choice but to flee. A level 4 evil creature is equivalent to a level 3 god. Even the god of fire and the others would definitely choose to avoid it. After all, who knows what's inside? If they paid a huge price to break in and didn't get anything good, it would be a huge loss, let alone 3. Naturally, he also thought that the god of light would choose to avoid it. However, after flying some distance, he was surprised to find that the god of light hadn't followed. Turning around, he saw that the god of light was standing still, seemingly without any intention of running away. He was shocked at just one glance and quickly flew back to Su Yun's side. God of light, do you mean? The god of rain swallowed hard, his heart suddenly tense, afraid of hearing a frightening answer. That's right, Su Yun said calmly. Those are 3 level 4 evil creatures, the god of rain said in disbelief. Even though he believed in the god of light, he trembled upon hearing his words. He himself had nearly been skinned alive facing 2 level 3 evil creatures, and comparing himself to the god of light, just thinking about what would happen to the god of light if he encountered 3 level 4 evil creatures, he could basically guess the outcome. Death or serious injury. However, no matter how earnestly he pleaded, Su Yun continued flying forward under his terrified gaze. Chapter 151 The Mysterious Liquid. You, the god of rain stammered for a long time, staring at his retreating figure. At the same time, he struggled internally, unsure whether to seize this opportunity to leave this dangerous place. What if he encountered those 3 level 4 evil creatures later? Just thinking about it made his face turn pale. But ultimately, remembering the help the god of light had given him, he couldn't move his feet and couldn't bring himself to flee first. After struggling for a while, he gritted his teeth and said, "As long as I stay far away later." Thinking this, he followed the god of light at a distance, his heart filled with fear. Su Yun noticed what was behind him, a look of surprise flashing across his face. He thought to himself that although the god of rain was talkative, he was still quite capable in other aspects. He didn't think for long, because the 3 evil creatures he had sensed earlier appeared ahead. One was green and jelly-like with a single eye, another was spherical with barbs around its edges, and the last one was ice blue, like a starfish made of ice crystals. Looking at these 3 level 4 evil creatures, he had to take them seriously. If he was careless, he might really suffer a Waterloo. Adhering to the principle of striking first, he made his move. Healing spell, weakened version. Instantly, a dazzling pale green aurora emanated from his hand, illuminating the 3 evil creatures that had just noticed their enemy. Before they could react, Su Yun, weakened, went all out. Golden Wheel. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 golden spheres instantly appeared around him. The next moment, 3 crystal-clear golden pillars, radiating powerful auras and moving with terrifying speed, shot straight towards their target. A mournful sound of air being torn apart echoed through the quiet palace. The 3 evil creatures, just recovering from their weakened state and before they could even retaliate in anger, were horrified to see the golden pillars of light hurtling towards them. They were too fast. They had no time to dodge PFFT without any surprise. The 3 attacks struck them. Bang! The ice crystal monster shattered into pieces, scattering across the ground. The spiked monster fared the same way, a hole pierced through it, its life force rapidly dissipating. The storm god, who had been following behind in fear, froze, his expression completely blank. What? Dead? He stared in disbelief at what had happened, his mind a complete blank. Huh? Su Yun looked at the jelly monster in surprise. Not dead, although the attack had pierced it, and the jelly monster had let out a shrill scream, its aura hadn't weakened much. Clearly, the golden wheel's attack seemed to have little effect on it. With a thought, Su Yun slashed with a golden wheel, instantly splitting it in 2. However, the creature merely wriggled slightly, healing itself and expelling the charred and damaged parts from its body. Aside from shrinking slightly, it was practically fully recovered. Before Su Yun could continue his attack, the jelly monster, moving at a speed disproportionate to its size, hopped rapidly towards him. So fast, although he didn't know its purpose, it was clear that being hit by it wouldn't end well. Since the golden wheel was less effective against it, he'd try another one. Holy Flame, a surging, milky white holy flame rushed aggressively towards the jelly monster. Caught off guard, the jelly monster crashed directly into the flame. The evil energy outside its body was quickly melted away by the holy flame, and upon contact with its body, the flame scorched a portion of it black. Fear appeared in its eyes, and it let out a painful howl. Gurgle. Seeing that things were going well, Su Yun called out, "Golden Wheel." He reached out, and the golden ball appeared, but before he could act, the jelly monster made a strange sound. Gurgle, gurgle. Just as Su Yun was on guard, the jelly monster leaped and darted away, leaving after images, and quickly disappeared into the distance. Su Yun, it ran away. He stared in surprise at the jelly monster, which had almost disappeared from sight in just a few seconds. Somewhat amused and exasperated, Su Yun hesitated for a moment, then gave up the pursuit. Only then did the god of rain dare to fly over from behind, stammering, "God of light, you." It took him a while to recover. "You actually killed 2 level 4 evil creatures. And even drove one away," Staring at Su-Yun, who was enveloped in radiance, he was speechless. The level 3 evil creatures were one thing, it was normal for the god of light to kill them instantly, but now even level 4 evil creatures were killed instantly? Keep in mind, those 2 level 4 evil creatures were almost equivalent to the combat power of a level 3 god. Yet even such powerful beings were so easily wiped out by the god of light? If he hadn't known he wasn't hallucinating, he would have thought everything before him was fake. It was unbelievable. A thought flashed through his mind, and he exclaimed in surprise to Su-Yun, "Doesn't this mean that even the other third-level gods, the god of light, you could easily defeat them, even?" He swallowed hard, shuddering, shocked by the terrifying thought that followed. Su-Yun shook his head, ignoring him, and simply said, "Let's go." With that, he flew towards the depths of the palace. The god of rain followed behind, staring blankly at his back, feeling utterly mysterious. He murmured to himself, deeply moved, "So you really are a monster." He had had this thought when the god of light instantly killed those third-level evil beings, but after learning that he was a third-level god, he understood. But now, looking at it again, he realized he hadn't been mistaken. The god of light was indeed a monster, a monstrously powerful one. Compared to how difficult it was for him to fight even 2 level 3 evil creatures, he knew just how monstrous the god of light was. Su-Yun turned his head in confusion, looking at him and asking, "What did you just say?" The god of storms shuddered and hurriedly said, "Nothing, you misheard." Su-Yun gave him a strange look, then continued flying forward. Because the god of storms held reverence in his heart, the journey was extremely quiet. Su-Yun paused slightly, his gaze sweeping over a hole in the wall in front of the palace, a hole through which one could even see the outside world. That thing must have escaped from here. After a moment's thought, they continued on their way. After flying for a few minutes, another strange thing appeared ahead. "What's this?" Su-Yun and the god of storms stared ahead, their faces filled with astonishment. A pool appeared before them, a wide jade pool filled with a mysterious golden liquid. The golden object emanated a powerful energy aura, although its purpose was unknown. It was clearly a valuable item. Su-Yun and his companion exchanged a glance, about to fly up to investigate. Just then, a sudden change occurred. Chapter 152 The Role of the Pool Water. Roar, a beastly roar suddenly resounded, echoing throughout the palace. Simultaneously, an unprecedented pressure crashed down upon them, causing their expressions to change drastically. This pressure, Su-Yun suppressed the urge to leave, his gaze fixed on the direction from which the pressure emanated. This pressure was arguably the strongest he had felt in a long time, far surpassing that of a third-level god. Ahead, a massive black tortoise clumsily emerged from its hiding place beside the pool, and sensing its aura, the pressure was clearly emanating from it. 5th level? Or even 6th level, Su-Yun guessed gravely. Just then, he noticed a golden chain binding the tortoise, seemingly used to imprison it. Seeing this, Su-Yun relaxed slightly. "What a powerful beast," the god of rain exclaimed in surprise. This aura made him tremble. "You are the beast." Suddenly, an aged voice rang out, causing Su-Yun and the other god to stare at the tortoise in astonishment. Intelligent, this turtle was clearly from the ruins. This was the first time they'd encountered a creature they could communicate with here. "Then what are you?" the god of rain asked instinctively. Of course, a divine beast," the turtle replied arrogantly. This answer made Su-Yun and the others frown. Su-Yun said softly, "If I'm not mistaken, you don't possess the aura of a god." The question seemed to choke the turtle, its eyes flashing with anger. You two juniors talk too much nonsense. If you have nothing else to say, leave, or I won't be polite," it said angrily. Su-Yun glanced at the golden pool water, then looked more closely at the turtle, noticing something unusual. He noticed that the turtle was thin and weak, a stark contrast to its powerful aura, giving the impression of bluffing. "What are those golden things?" Su-Yun asked abruptly. Upon hearing this, the turtle instinctively moved, directly blocking the front of the pool. "This is not something you can covet," he warned, as the oppressive aura returned, pressing down firmly on them. "I'm just kindly reminding you, if you take another step forward, you won't be leaving. Don't you even think about how this pool has managed to hold its water until now, preventing those evil creatures from ruining it?" He chuckled, his tortoise face contorting into a fierce and menacing expression. The god of storms was terrified, a sense of fear creeping into his heart. He turned to the god of light and said, "Let's avoid it." Feeling the immense pressure pressing down on him, he was genuinely afraid of this tortoise, fearing it might actually attack and capture them. He just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Suyun seemed lost in thought, ignoring the god of storms. He hesitated for a moment, then suddenly spoke. "You probably don't have much strength left, do you?" A hush fell over the scene. "What?" The god of storms was stunned. The old tortoise's calm expression cracked, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes. Although he quickly composed himself, the fleeting change in his eyes was still noticed by Suyun, who was watching him intently, instantly putting Suyun's mind at ease. Just as I suspected, he had initially only guessed, but the old tortoise's withered appearance was suspicious, and his last few words seemed somewhat superfluous and bluffing. If it were someone else, they might have been fooled, but for someone accustomed to various films and books, the flaws were far too numerous. However, just to be on the safe side, Suyun had tested him again, and the result was as he expected. Suyun said calmly, "Your aura can only fool those foolish evil creatures at best. Don't try to show it off in front of me, you." The old tortoise was shocked, immediately losing his composure, and said in a blustering but weak voice, "What nonsense are you spouting?" Suyun didn't waste any more words, and a burst of white light appeared in his hand, as if he was about to attack. "Wait! Don't do it." The old turtle retreated in fright, quickly forcing a smile. "Let's talk this out. If you want the pool water, don't be shy, take whatever you want." Suyun narrowed his eyes, a slight smile appearing on his lips. He then dissipated the white light and lowered his hand. The god of rain also realized what was happening and angrily shouted, "You old turtle, how dare you play me?" With that, he waved his hand, and light blue divine power immediately attacked. Ah! The old turtle was startled, and with a cry of pain, it withdrew its limbs and head. Bang! The divine power struck the turtle's shell, but to the surprise of Suyun and the god of rain, the attack left no mark on the turtle. The god of rain's expression changed slightly, and a look of astonishment flashed in Suyun's eyes. The old turtle, huddled in its shell, was overjoyed to see no pain. It looked at the god of rain, about to curse, but then its eyes darted to Suyun beside it, and it instinctively shut its mouth. He could only curse inwardly, "You brat! If I weren't so exhausted, I would have given you a piece of my mind." If he hadn't been greedy for the water in this pool back then, he wouldn't have fallen into this palace's trap, resulting in his current extreme weakness and inability to escape. If it weren't for his naturally long lifespan, he might have already died here. Even so, being bullied by a second-level god still infuriated him. If it weren't for the somewhat strange-looking third-level god beside him, he would have already unleashed a torrent of curses. The god of rain, his eyes filled with anger, was about to continue his attack on the tortoise when Suyun stopped him. Suyun looked at the tortoise. "What is the water in this pool?" The old tortoise hesitated, glancing at him warily before reluctantly saying, "This is holy water. Whether it's a god or any other creature, bathing in this holy water will purify the energy within their body." "What?" The god of rain was astonished, and even Suyun's eyes widened in surprise, his gaze towards the golden holy water changing. "Let's give it a try," Suyun said after a moment's thought. He didn't sense any danger in the holy water, so it should be close to safe. Without prior arrangement, they both entered the pool, which was a few meters in diameter. As soon as they entered, Suyun felt a strange energy trying to seep into his body, but it was instinctively blocked by his divine power. With a thought, he released the restriction, and the power slowly seeped into his body. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.